You're going to Brazil!
The Three Caballeros sure is a longer and more annoying version of Saludos Amigos. Yeah, I don't know, this one didn't really work for me. It starts out with the framing device being Donald just watching random movies, like this random penguin short that isn't really that fun or charming. Then there's a flying donkey story that also isn't very good.
Hey, I can fly!
Then the main story kicks in and it's just Donald vibing with Jose and then getting sent to Brazil, where they meet Panchito and go to Mexico and learn about it, and also Donald is extremely horny the entire time and will flirt with any live action woman that he sees. Then there's a bunch of colorful noise on the screen and then it's over. Some of the animation is neat and I like Jose and Panchito, plus that one bit where Panchito keeps singing and Donald and Jose try to cut him off genuinely got a really good laugh out of me. But Donald's a bit annoying in this one with his insane horniness, and overall it just feels like the film is constant chaos with absolutely no structure and no off switch. The few moments where the film actually does slow down are genuinely jarring. Like after a shit ton of wacky nonsense, Panchito's suddenly like, oh by the way, let's all take a moment to celebrate the journey of Mary and Joseph and the customs we perform to commemorate them. And it's like, where did that serious quiet moment come from in a movie that's been nothing but chaos for the past 45 minutes? I also can't really tell if this movie's culturally accurate or if it's offensive and exploitative. With some Disney movies, it's extremely easy to tell. But with this one, I'm not so sure, and I'd love to hear from Brazilian and Mexican people regarding how they feel about it. All I know is, I didn't really enjoy it all that much, and I thought Saludos Amigos was better, even though that movie had its own shortcomings, which we'll get to later. One more thing I'll say about this though. It's one of many older Disney movies that uses the word gay as a synonym for happy. Obviously this is hilarious and a big fuck you to modern homophobic Disney, but its use in this movie is particularly funny because even though Donald keeps flirting with women, the main characters keep singing about how they're three gay caballeros. Donald Duck, the bi icon we needed.
Give it up for Snow White!
I was not expecting to enjoy Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Respect it, sure. I mean, how can you not respect the first feature-length animated film ever made? But on top of that, I actually liked it? I can't believe it. It's just such a simple, charming film with stunning animation. Like, this shit came out in 1937, and it still looks this vibrant and alive almost a century later. I'm blown away by what they were able to accomplish back then. Just the way these characters move, the way their little noses pop up on the bed in that iconic shot. A lot of this movie's charm relies on the physical comedy with the dwarves working. And holy moly, it doesn't just work, it soars. The dwarves are definitely the best part of this. Not only are they well animated, but it's just so fun to watch their interactions and their mischief unfold. I enjoy the delightful, unabashed evilness of the queen as well. And like, yeah, Snow White is kind of a boring and very dated protag, but she's still a lovely and sweet person. Not one of the best Disney princesses, but not really a terrible one. Everyone loves to rag on this film's ending with the prince, and yeah, it's complete nonsense. It could have worked if they established an actual romance between them earlier in the film before Snow White had to flee from the queen. But no. Actually, the entire ending is kind of weird because the conflict really only gets started in the last 10 minutes. Like, everything from the evil queen visiting Snow White and poisoning her, to the happily ever after with the prince who kissed her while she was in a coma, is just crammed into those 10 minutes. That's kind of bizarre, especially considering how some of the sequences earlier in the movie, like Snow White cleaning the dwarves' house or the dwarves dancing with her, do go on a bit too long. Like, the runtime for this film feels like it perfectly suits the amount of story content on paper, but they didn't quite even out the amount of time each part of the story should get. But in spite of some parts feeling too slow, or too rushed, or too hilariously dated, it's still such a nice film. The songs are incredibly pleasant and evoke early musical theater really well. The animation is delightful and somewhat evocative of the Fleischer cartoons of that era. It's just overall still a good movie, and a must-watch for animation and Disney fans. Just to see how this whole Disney animation thing got rolling. Though I must say, I do have to question the queen's logic of making a potion that turns people ugly, and then using it on herself instead of Snow White, just so she has a disguise to feed Snow White a poison apple with. Why not just force her to drink the ugly potion and skip the poison apple step entirely? SMH, work smarter, not harder, queen.
I caught the ugly!
Father, when can I leave to be on my own?
Even though I was only 2 movies into this marathon, I could already tell that Pinocchio is one of the weirdest things Walt Disney Animation Studios has ever made. It has a lot of the same structural issues as Jungle Book. It's a very and then this happens sort of movie, where all the little misadventures Pinocchio gets into don't really connect or flow together all that well. But I will give Pinocchio this. It's a lot more fun than Jungle Book because of how batshit insane the stuff he gets into is. He gets held prisoner by this delightfully evil Italian stereotype before he gets free and then never sees him again. Then he goes to this island where little boys are turned into donkeys and sold into indentured servitude, which is an absolutely fucking insane plot point. But then he escapes and those donkey boys are never seen again. Then he goes home, but his father Geppetto isn't there, only for him to read a letter that tells him that his father was eaten by a fucking whale. What? Where did that come from? What's happening? This movie's insane plot structure would be totally fine if it had a strong theme tying it all together, but that's kind of my biggest issue with it. This is designed to be a morality story where Pinocchio's values are tested so he can potentially become a real boy in the end. But the problem is, he doesn't really get into these precarious situations because of his faulty morals or values. It's more so because he's just naive and doesn't know how the world works. So he trusts this shifty fox man who tricks him into getting into these scenarios. It's less so a failure of Pinocchio's character and more so a failure of Jiminy Crickets for just being an irresponsible, terrible guardian. As well as Geppetto for not just walking him to school and making sure he gets there. Like, if you've never seen the movie, you probably assume Pinocchio's nose that grows whenever he lies plays into the movie a lot. It's a blatant examination of his honesty, and it's what most people typically associate with the character. But yeah, no, he only lies and causes his nose to grow in one scene. He's not like a pathological liar who needs to learn over the course of the movie that lying is wrong. He's just a naive kid who was literally born yesterday, who gets into bad situations because his guardians don't even try to tell him the difference between right and wrong. So the movie is very flawed as a morality story, but it's definitely worth a watch to see all the batshit insane stuff that happens. There's something very special about seeing a Disney icon like Pinocchio smoking a cigar, as well as hearing the word jackass multiple times in a Disney film. There's some weird-ass, questionable clocks that Geppetto made, like this one of a mom spanking her boy's naked buttock with this red paint on it that looks like blood. And then there's this bodacious figure. Why did he make either of these? In one scene, the cat goes up his ass, and also he sleeps with a gun under his pillow, which is delightful. There's a song they sing that proudly proclaims, an actor's life is gay. Haha, fuck you, modern Disney, you homophobes. This is in one of your movies. You can't erase this. There are references to Alice in Wonderland and Little Mermaid at different points. Intentional foreshadowing? No, definitely not. These are just funny coincidences. What is intentional foreshadowing, however, is the fact that this movie has the Red Lobster in. This movie came out in 1940 and Red Lobster was founded in 1968. Pinocchio predicted Red Lobster. This is 100% canon and cannot be disputed. Thank you, Pinocchio, for giving us this amazing, completely overpriced, not really all that great seafood. Olive Garden gang for life, baby! Have you tried their never-ending pasta bowl? It never ends! I'll keep my discussion of Dumbo pretty brief, since, well, the movie's pretty brief. It's a very weird mismatch of exceptionally great stuff, exceptionally terrible stuff, and a couple average elements thrown in as well. The pink elephant scene, as entirely pointless as it is some awesome shit. It's impressive 2D animation by modern standards, and this movie came out in 1941. There's absolutely no reason they needed to go this hard on the scene. I mean, there's also no reason it had to be in the movie at all, but I'm glad it is, cause it's the best part. The mouse in this is also honestly just a better Jiminy Cricket. Like, he's a lot more supportive and entertaining. Why can't he be the one keeping track of Sora's adventures, SMH? The crows are undeniably terrible racist caricatures. But with that said, they're at least positive characters who help and support Dumbo, and they get the best song in the movie. So they're bad, but I guess not as bad as they could have been? The way more racist shit was those faceless carnival workers. Warning, don't listen to their song. It's ultra racist cringe. Dumbo is cute. The grown-ass elephant ladies all having beef with a literal infant is kinda funny. Anyway, after Dumbo and the mouse get drunk and hallucinate pink elephants, they wake up in a tree and the crows inform them that Dumbo can fly. So then he flies and everyone loves him and he's famous and the conflict is immediately over. He just had to notice he could fly. Yeah, there's not a lot of plot structure in this one, and there's no third act at all. It's just an hour and 3 minutes of Dumbo getting born, getting ridiculed, getting drunk, and then he learns he can fly at the end. It's pretty mid, and I'll probably only ever watch the pink elephant scene again, but yeah, not too bad when it's not being the absolute worst.
Your mom is dead. Do an order of pizza for dinner.
Sorry guys, I didn't really like Bambi. I definitely understand why a ton of people love this one. It's very beautiful in its depiction of nature, thanks in large part to the animation and the music. And I was definitely really sucked into it during the first 15 minutes. But then the novelty kinda wore off for me, and I started to notice just how practically non-existent the story was, and how entirely uninteresting the characters were. Apparently everybody cries when Bambi's mom dies, but I was completely unmoved by it because I couldn't think of a single character trait Bambi or his mom had. Plus, it's supposed to be this big sad moment, but then immediately after we have this aggressively cheerful song about how lovely springtime is. And Bambi's all grown up now and appears to be completely unaffected by the death of his mom. Like, he entirely forgot about it. Now it's time for him to fall in love with a girl deer that he met once during his childhood. Wow. He's been Twitter-pated. Haha, funny Twitter reference. There's also a lot of scenes, especially in the first half, that are just trying aggressively hard to be cutesy, but didn't really work for me at all. Also, Thumper's kind of annoying. The ending where they have to escape the fire is cool, but yeah, for the most part, this one wasn't for me. I probably would have loved it if it was just a short film, but alas, 'twasn't meant to be. Also, obviously it's valid to like or love this film, but if you seriously try to say with a straight face that Man is one of the best Disney villains of all time, I will break into your house and make you feel unsafe. Make mine music. So, this one is the only film in the Disney animated canon to not be available on Disney Plus for some reason. I have no idea why. I mean, the ones with actual racist content in them are on there, but this one doesn't seem to have any. Plus, the other package films are available there, so I genuinely don't get it. Did they just forget? They probably forgore.
I keep having this nagging feeling that I've forgotten something.
Hey, if you forgot it, it probably wasn't all that important.
It's a shame too, because this is leagues better than Fun and Fancy Free and Melody Time. I mean, it's still not really that good, but it's better than those two. There's a few segments I legitimately enjoyed here. Like the one with all the teens dancing to swing music was really energetic and fun. Probably my favorite part of the whole film. The baseball segment was fun too, with its cartoony slapstick and whatnot. There's a romance story about a fedora that simps for a blue bonnet hat. I am not making that up. It is a musical segment about a down bad fedora. I can't even tell if it's like actually good, but I certainly derived a lot of enjoyment from it, so take that for what it's worth. And then there's a story about a whale who wants to be an opera singer. That's a very funny concept and it's executed pretty well, honestly. So yeah, plenty of enjoyable shorts, but the connective tissue between them is non-existent. There's no framing device and a lot of slow, boring, not particularly well animated segments that balance out all the inspired or fun ones. Couple that with the Peter and the Wolf and Martins and the Koi segments just kind of being okay, and you have a very mixed bag of a film. Some good stuff that I'd recommend checking out if you can find them somewhere, but it's not really worth it to watch this whole thing. The fact that Disney refuses to put this on streaming, but they have Mulan 2020 and Artemis Fowl there is embarrassing.
If it's not fun, why bother?
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, in the 40s, because of World War II, Disney didn't have enough money to make full-fledged animated movies with one continuous story. So they made a bunch of package films that essentially consisted of a collection of shorts that have nothing to do with each other, getting slapped together and shoved in theaters. It was a valid practice that helped them stay afloat during this time period and raise enough money for the narrative features that they actually wanted to make. These package films, though, are pretty infamous for being not good. I watched them and yep! The worst one of these is Fun and Fancy Free, which is just so bad in so many ways that it's kind of ridiculous. First of all, there's only 2 stories being told, and the first one is absolutely awful. Half the movie dedicated to the boring as shit tale of Bongo the Bear. It's like Bambi if it were shitty, and it made me wish I was watching fucking Brother Bear instead. We're just following this stupid ass circus bear as he escapes and starts living in the woods, and then there's a lady bear, and aw, they're in love. But oh no, now there's a big bear you have to fight. And there's also a song about how you should slap your significant other in order to express how much you love them. I wish I was making this up. I fucking hate this short so much. Oh, sorry. Did I say short? How silly of me. This banal and agonizing fucking tale takes up 40 minutes. I could live with this shit if it was condensed into 10 minutes. But really? You thought this story was worthy of taking up half a feature film? I hope Bongo dies a slow and agonizing death. I never want to see him again. The next story of Mickey and the Beanstalk is kind of okay. Not particularly interesting, but not the worst. However, it simply wouldn't be good enough for Jiminy Cricket, the character who led us into the first story, to do the same with the second. No siree! Instead, we have to go to this pathetic birthday party with two annoying as shit ventriloquist dummies who make dumbass, unfunny remarks throughout the entirety of the Mickey story. It just put me in a bad fucking mood, and I couldn't enjoy anything that was happening. Not even the funny meme scene where Mickey cuts the super thin bread. This was truly agonizing, and you should never watch it ever. It's so bad. Next!
Like a melody.
Melody time! I'm gonna be honest, I forgot everything that happened in this package film as soon as it was over. At least nothing overstayed its welcome, like the bongo short, but at least I remember how much I despise that thing. Everything in this short is just straight up boring. There were a few cute moments in the cowboy short, and I kinda liked the bee short, but nothing else really stuck with me.
Why are you blue?
The tugboat short was really lame. There's a weird out of nowhere Three Caballeros callback with a live action woman, because apparently there wasn't enough of those in Three Caballeros. And also, Johnny Appleseed is a punk ass bitch. I could probably beat him up if I wanted to. I don't know why that's relevant, I just have nothing else to say about the shorts collection. Just an incredibly unmemorable and tedious time had by all. I'm pooped.
Don't worry, don't lose your head.
Made a few bad decisions and ended up totaling my Scion TC at 100 miles an hour.
The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, a movie consisting of two short films that couldn't be more different in terms of tone, plot, and presentation. Sandwiching these two together into one film was certainly an odd choice, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy one of these significantly more than the other. The Mr. Toad story is fine, it's whatever. I just don't really care about the characters in this one. Mr. Toad is kind of annoyingly energetic, and his friends are just kind of typical wet blankets there to reel him in. I kind of like how this took a turn into a courtroom comedy, but ultimately, I don't think this short really found its footing until the ending. The final madcap battle here is filled with such delightful comedic slapstick that it definitely made the ho-hum build-up worth it in the end. It's a decent little short. Now the Headless Horseman story, that's the real meat and potatoes of this compilation. First of all, it's narrated by Bing Crosby, who also performs the songs, and that's epic. I love me a good Bing Crosby song, that's some good shit. But also, I find the animation in this one a lot more expressive. It's some of my favorite in all of classic Disney. The shenanigans that Ichabod Crane and Beta Gaston get into trying to woo this lady are really funny. And of course, the crown jewel of this short is the actual Headless Horseman stuff. The song is catchy as hell, and it's honestly one of the few older Disney songs that hold up really well compared to their modern music. And the actual confrontation with the horseman is so deliciously dark. I love it. Maybe a few parts of the beginning and the middle are paced a bit too slow, but for the most part, this short is great. It definitely makes up for the rather uneven Mr. Toad short, and makes this a pretty good package overall. I'd say it's worth checking out, especially compared to Fun and Fancy Free, which deserves to rot in a ditch somewhere.
Please welcome Cinderella.
I don't really like Cinderella stories that much. Out of all the commonly adapted fairy tales, I just find this one to be the most played out and boring. The only time I liked a Cinderella adaptation was that one Fruits Basket episode. Everything else can go home, I don't give a shit. I mean, there's probably other good Cinderella movies out there. I haven't seen them all, so I can't really say. All I know is this one kinda sucks. You might say, oh, well it was one of the first ones, cut it some slack. No, but here's the thing. I don't just dislike it because it's played out by modern standards. It's also actually a pretty bad retelling of the Cinderella story. They speed through everything involving her backstory and how she ended up subservient to her stepmother and stepsisters, shoving that all into the opening narration in the first 3 minutes. The prince isn't even a fucking character in this. He shows up for the first time like 50 minutes in, and the two of them don't even have a conversation until it's midnight and she's ready to leave.
I don't even know your name. How will I find you?
You what?
Most of this movie is just mice dicking around, and they're not funny or charming at all. Their scenes are just really tedious. Sometimes there's fun slapstick with Lucifer the cat, who's really well animated and menacing, more so than the actual human villains who are just kind of boring. I guess the king has some funny moments here and there as well, but overall, this is a movie that just feels completely unfocused. We shouldn't be spending most of the movie on wacky Tom and Jerry hijinks, and the king having a pillow fight with his manservant. We should be focused on giving Cinderella more character, and giving the prince a character. I haven't seen Cinderella 3 yet, but that one clip everyone keeps posting of the prince jumping out the window has more life and personality to it than everything in this first movie. The animation's pretty and some of the songs are nice, but honestly, this was a slog to get through. I don't hate all the old Disney princess movies, as you'll see later on in this list, but this one, yeah, I can't say I'm a fan. However, I did want to point out that the dog in this movie is named Bruno. How come we don't talk about that? Also, Lucifer fucking dies, LMAO.
Come to Wonderland, her never finds you.
Out of all the old-ass Disney movies, the one that I consider to be the best by far is Alice in Wonderland. It brings the original story to life beautifully with unbridled creativity in the animation, and it's just a wonderfully fun and chaotic journey throughout. Alice is such a likable protagonist to view this world through the lens of. Her voice acting is incredibly expressive and complements her animation and writing very nicely. But obviously, the main appeal of the film is the seemingly never-ending gaggle of wacky side characters she comes across. The Mad Hatter, the March Hare, the Queen of Hearts, the Cheshire Cat, the motherfucking Cheshire Cat, come on! Banger character! I might be biased because I played him in the stage version of this show during my youth, but I mean, he's awesome, what can I say? Yeah, the film is very episodic and not everything flows together that naturally, but like, that's kind of the point, right? It suits the literal dreamlike nature of the film to just have all this chaotic, seemingly disconnected stuff happen one after the other. This legitimately feels like a wild and crazy dream. The kind that you never want to wake up from because you just want to see what nonsensical shit is gonna happen next. I guess some parts go on a bit too long, and conversely, there are some characters that I wanted to see even more of, like the Cheshire Cat, but those are my only real complaints. Overall, a banger film that you should definitely check out if you haven't already. I mean, the Walrus and the Carpenter segment alone is better than some entire Disney films. And that's just a side story in this magnificently charming, wacky, iconic, off-the-wall film.
Peter Pan and Tinkerbell.
I don't really know where to start with Peter Pan. Do I discuss the big, glaring, horribly racist elephant in the room first? Or do I express the fact that with the huge exception of said horribly racist elephant, this is probably one of the most charming and timeless Disney films to this day. Like legit, this was so close to being the best of the classic Disney films in my opinion. But man, its portrayal of Native Americans is just... well, I don't need to get into it. You know how Disney was back then. You know it's terrible. And it really sucks, because that, coupled with a bit of sexism they added in for good measure, are really the only issues I have with this movie. Everything else is so charming and whimsical and filled with life, evoking such powerful feelings of childlike wonder that suit the nature of the story incredibly well. It's fun to follow Peter Pan and see all the wacky shenanigans he gets into, and Wendy is very likable and enjoyable as well. I also honestly love the fact that Tinkerbell is legitimately evil in this movie, constantly trying to murder Wendy out of jealousy. This is the character that Disney has turned into one of their premier mascots, and she's also a sociopath with a long history of violence. That's amazing. Alright, but enough about these chumps. Y'all know which characters make this movie. Captain Hook and Shmi are so delightful. Every scene with them is comedic gold, from the writing to the voice acting to the animation. I really can't get enough of them, and I fully get the hype behind Captain Hook as a villain. Such an extra little bitch. Oh, don't worry, I promise not to lay a hand nor hook on Peter Pan, and I would never break that promise. So instead I just sent him a pipe bomb. Yay! Truly incredible. And the crocodile with a ticking alarm clock, like dude, that's fun as shit. There's epic sword fights and a ton of jokes that still hold up really well to this day. And overall, there's just very little about this film that's boring. It's just boatloads of fun. It's just so unfortunate that parts of it have to be so awful and dated. But that's just how Disney was back then, I suppose. It'd be cool if they did a non-problematic remake of this. Oh god, no, that's not what I meant. I meant an animated remake. Oh god, what the fuck? No!
I hope she made lots of spaghetti.
I just finished Lady and the Tramp, and I don't remember a single thing that happened in it outside of the spaghetti scene. Okay, hold on, let me watch it again.
1 hour later.
Yeah, nope, still nothing. Okay, I'll watch it for a third time, and this time I'll write down my points as I'm watching. Okay, got it. The entire first 30 minutes of this movie is so unnecessarily drawn out, and it takes forever for anything interesting to get going. I don't mind when a movie vibes for a while as long as the characters are enjoyable, but these ones are just really boring. Aunt Sarah is a pitiful quote-unquote antagonist. Her racist cats only appear for one scene to torment Lady and then disappear from the movie entirely. which is probably a good thing. The romance is practically non-existent. If you take out the admittedly really good spaghetti scene with the lovely Italian stereotypes, then barely anything about Lady and Tramp's interactions feel romantic. There's not even really that strong of a contrast between Lady's fancy upbringing and Tramp's rugged lifestyle. You'd think Lady would have trouble adjusting to life outside her house and Tramp could help her along. Or they could argue about who has the more fulfilling life. You know, interesting things you can do with this premise. But they don't do those. The plot also shifts into maximum overdrive in the last 10 minutes when a random rat we've never seen before breaks into the baby's room, so Tramp has to save the baby. But uh-oh, Aunt Sarah thinks he was attacking the baby, so he's sent to the dog pound. But don't worry, Lady shows that, oh shit, it was a rat, which means the other two dogs now go rescue Tramp, and Lady and her owners follow behind. And then one of the dogs seems to die, but then it turns out he's fine, he just broke his leg. And now the rich couple adopted Tramp, and he and Lady have a ton of kids, and they all come together for Christmas. And yeah, that was all crammed into the last 10 minutes. This movie meanders for so long in the first half, and then it tries to make up for that meandering at the very end with this breakneck, madcap climax. It's not good. I will never remember anything about it except for the lovely Italian stereotype scene.
Wake him up like Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty is the best of the three classic Disney princess movies because it has Maleficent, and Maleficent is cool as shit. Now that I've seen this movie, I finally get the hype around her. Yeah, she's not complex or layered or anything. She's pretty one-dimensional and her motivation is just, she didn't get invited to the party, oh no. But I don't know, that's what's so cool about her. She's just this petty bad bitch who's evil and she loves it. And she delivers the rawest line in any Disney movie.
Now shall you deal with me, O prince, and all the powers of hell!
Like hell yeah. Fuck him up. You're doing great, sweetie. The entire last 15 minutes of this movie are such an incredible and surprisingly tense spectacle, with such potent gothic imagery and amazing colors. So yeah, great villain, and also the rest of it's not bad either. You can tell Disney learned from the mistakes of Snow White and Cinderella, and they're starting to make progress with the central romance. Like, the prince and princess here spend a bit of time together. Plus, the prince has some personality and a couple funny lines. He acts a little bit creepy in the woods, but it's not too bad. Ultimately, he's a step up from the last two boring-ass princes. Aurora's kinda boring, but honestly, she's not really the main character. It's more about the three fairies raising her, who are pretty charming and occasionally funny as well. And so are the kings of the two kingdoms where the prince and princess are from. Honestly, I'm just surprised at how charming nearly all of the characters were. And not only that, but the backgrounds and shot compositions in this movie are just so richly cinematic. This movie has one of the best visual styles of any classic Disney film, and I really wanted to highlight how good it looks, especially for its time. I also appreciate the logic present in the plot. Going into this movie, I thought the whole Aurora pricking her finger on a spinning wheel thing was gonna be really dumb, because that's how it sounds. LMAO, why don't they just get rid of all the spinning wheels so that's not an option? Oh, that's actually what they did in the movie. And not only that, but they hide her away and change her name so Maleficent can't find her. Huh. It's nice to have a movie with smart characters for a change, even if the fairies kinda grab onto the idiot ball towards the end and leave her unattended. Like, I know she's sad, but you should probably stay with her to make sure she doesn't die, since Maleficent said she was gonna die on her 16th birthday, but okay. Not only that, but the pacing does kinda drag this one down a bit, since even though most of the characters are charming, their charm starts to wear thin when you realize there hasn't really been much forward momentum in the plot for the first 40 minutes or so. But ultimately, it's a very good movie. I liked it and stuff.
I only wish to have a coat made out of topping.
101 Dull Martians is a pretty good movie. Out of all the classic Disney films focusing on common household pets like dogs or cats, I think this one is pretty handily the best one, for a couple of reasons. First, the art style's incredible. God, I would love to live in this gorgeous, sketchy world. Plus, while the opening of this movie is a delightful, lighthearted meet cute that's really fun to vibe to, the actual plot about the Dalmatians getting kidnapped and having to be rescued is super entertaining as well. Honestly, I would love it if someone made a stealth video game similar to that game Stray everyone was talking about a few months ago, where you play as one of these Dalmatians and you have to escape the watchful eye of Cruella. And yeah, honestly, I was kinda seeing how long I could go in this segment without talking about Cruella, which it turns out is not very long. And for good reason. She's easily the most entertaining part of the movie, and I love her delicious malice. If anything though, I kinda wish she was in the movie a lot more. She's shockingly underused given how entertaining she is and how iconic she came to be. If only there was an entire movie dedicated to her or something. Too bad no such movie exists. Anyway, while the beginning and ending in this movie are both pretty great, the middle is a bit eh. The focus shifts away from the main characters for a little too long, as we instead focus on random other animals we've never met. And they're fine, but I just think their scenes go on a bit too long and take focus away from the main characters. Speaking of which, while the Dalmatians get to be plot relevant in the final act as they save their children, the human protagonists are sidelined really hard and don't get to do anything, which is kinda lame. Lastly, there's this shot towards the very end with all the new puppies, and they say, there must be 100 of them. But fuck that shit, man. I actually counted, and there's way more than 100 puppies in this shot. I mean, I don't know exactly how many, because I kind of stopped counting when I hit 100, but trust me, there's more. 101 Dalmatians, my ass. I'm on to you, animators from the 1960s who put too many puppies in this shot. Don't fuck with me. I always win the counting minigame in Mario Party, so I know what I'm talking about when I say that this is some bullshit. But yeah, other than that, really good movie.
The making of Arthur.
The Sword in the Stone. Yeah, this one kinda sucked, sorry. Essentially, this is the story of King Arthur. Except not actually, because the King Arthur stuff only happens in the opening narration and the last 10 minutes of the movie. For most of it, King Arthur is this bumbling, uninteresting kid who meets Merlin, and Merlin's all like, wow, kid, we really need to get you an education. So the rest of the movie is Merlin turning him into various animals, so I guess he can learn animal stuff. This movie is disjointed and not very well thought out or good. The lessons Merlin teaches Arthur are super generic and don't really tie into their animal misadventures that well at all. Said animal misadventures really aren't that interesting and they go on for a while. The songs are hilariously unmemorable. Merlin has this talking owl companion who's just a huge asshole and not funny or likable in the slightest. I guess Merlin himself is okay, and there's a pretty cool wizard duel at the end with Madame Mim, but that's about it. The ending is unintentionally hilarious because it's here that they finally remember, oh shit, this is supposed to be a King Arthur story. And they shove him pulling the sword and becoming king into the last 10 minutes of this movie. Did this kid really do anything to earn the ability to pull the sword? Are the vague, barely developed lessons he learned as a squirrel and a fish really enough to justify his divine status as the ruler of this entire land? During this movie's climactic battle with Madame Mim, the character we just met 10 minutes before said climactic battle, Arthur doesn't even do anything. He just sits back and watches as Merlin does the entire fight. So really, why is Arthur the king now? Answer me that, Wolfgang Reitherman, director of this movie. Then in like the last 3 minutes of the movie, Arthur's like, man, I don't want to be king. I don't know how to do it. I wish Merlin were here. And then Merlin shows up and he's like, don't worry, broski, you got this. You're gonna be a great king. Don't ask me how you're gonna do it, but you're gonna be good at being king. It's fine, dude. And that's the note that the movie ends on. The fuck? Weird ass confused as all hell movie. I'm never gonna watch it again, but I guess I'm glad it exists so Merlin can be in Kingdom Hearts and give me access to the Winnie the Pooh world. That's always a nice world.
Take a look, it's in a jungle book.
I mean the bare necessities, oh something something Chesapeake, blah 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 blah. I don't really like the Jungle Book that much, but man, those songs are swell. My face lit up during Bare Necessities and I Want to Be Like You. I was singing along, having a great time, feeling so good overall. And then the rest of the movie was kinda boring. Don't get me wrong, I see why a lot of people love this one. It's nice and laid back and the characters are very charming. Baloo and Bagheera both trying to influence Mowgli and butting heads is a fun dynamic. Shere Khan is a simple but effective antagonist, even if he's just kind of a beta Scar in hindsight. The voice acting is good all around, the environments look nice, but like, man, there's just no story to this movie. Mowgli is told he needs to go to the man village, and then he doesn't, and he just walks around talking to a bunch of random animals. That's the entire fucking premise, and it gets really old. I don't know, this might be blasphemous to say, but I honestly think the live-action remake, as average as that was, might be a little bit better than the original here. Despite its failings, it at least had more of a story, plus it had some cool visual effects. With this one, it's just an extremely one-note and kinda tedious trek through this jungle, with characters that range from extremely charming like Baloo and King Louie, to incredibly forgettable like these elephants and vultures. I just watched the movie and I don't remember anything they said or did. The ending is so funny to me because Mowgli is so adamant about never wanting to leave the jungle and live in the man village, but then the moment he sees some random girl, he's instantly smitten and abandons the jungle and Baloo completely just to get in her DMs. I'm not gonna criticize a movie from 1967 for ending this way. I just think it's hilarious that a movie that never even brought up the idea of romance prior to this point still somehow found a way to end with a hetero love interest for Mowgli. Like, Disney sure was committed to these romances back in the old day, huh? Yeah, sorry, I don't care for this one too much. I feel bad because it is pretty inoffensive and harmless. I just couldn't get invested in this incredibly minimal story. But I have had Bare Necessities stuck in my head for the past week. I fully get the hype with this song. It's so fun. I mean the bare necessities, those motherfucking recipes. The Aristocats is like the perfect example of an average Disney film. It's a charming little movie with a cute little story and nice animation, and yeah, I don't know, it was perfectly pleasant. I thought these two dogs were funny, and I liked the slapstick they got into with Edgar, who's also a pretty delightfully petty villain, even if he is a bit simplistic. The dude cat had a pretty sexy voice, and I liked him bonding with the family and all that stuff. The song Everybody Likes was pretty good, except when it was racist. The movie was never annoying, though maybe some scenes went on a bit too long, and it could have been a tad shorter since there's not really a lot of story content. But at the end of the day, it's cute, it's fun, I had a decent time watching it. There's just not a whole lot to say about it, and I probably won't see it again.
Oh, merry man!
Ah, I remember my first exposure to Disney's Robin Hood. It was in the year of our Lord 2022. It was this year. When I watched Hour of Poop's YTP masterpiece, Friar's Rubbing Wood, Fall of Nottingham. It's legitimately one of the funniest and most well-edited YouTube poops I've ever seen. And I kind of assumed that when I got to the actual Robin Hood movie, it would be a disappointment in comparison. And yeah, obviously that's true. But I was actually surprised at how good of a movie it really was. It's got an incredibly endearing cast of characters, from the heroes to the villains. And I surprisingly really liked how laid back and chill it was. I assumed Robin Hood would have some sort of epic adventure to go on, but it's more about him scamming Prince John and trying to get back with his lady friend, and it's pretty fun stuff, not gonna lie. I think it would have been cooler if these characters were used for some sort of heist movie, in the vein of... Mail?
You got mail.
Whoa. In the vein of something like, say, Lupin the Third. And we do get kind of a heist at the end, but it's not really anything substantial or elaborate. Speaking of the ending, that shit is dumb. Everyone is suffering because of Prince John being a terrible, greedy king. So Robin Hood's clearly gonna unseat him somehow, right? No, actually, the real king comes back from the war off screen in the last 3 minutes of the movie, and then he takes over again. Don't worry about it, everything's fine now. Disney would never want its protagonists to overthrow a monarchy, don't be silly. Anyway, I also think the romance and Maid Marian's character in general is kinda weak. Plus, yeah, the notorious recycled animation in this movie does really stick out, even though I do understand that it was necessary for budgetary restrictions. It's weird because it almost blends in pretty well, but your brain notices it more because they got the exact same voice actor as Baloo to voice Little John, who already looks exactly like Baloo. So since you're already thinking about how this bear is literally just Baloo again, you're more prone to notice that he dances in the exact same manner as Baloo in this one scene. Why did they have to use the same actor? And why did they give the snake hypnosis eyes in the first scene? He doesn't even use them later in the movie. It's just an awkwardly placed Jungle Book callback that reeks of recycled animation that they didn't need to recycle. So okay, yeah, there are problems and weird little things, but honestly, this movie's just really fun overall. Fun characters, good slapstick, immaculate vibes. I really do like it. Even if the YouTube poop was better. I mean, it has Django Fett. That automatically makes it better. Come on.
Start the new rescue helicopter.
The Rescuers is better than the Rescuers Down Under because the mice actually have a role in the story in this one. And the kid isn't a supreme dumbass. She's actually pretty smart and adorable and just overall pretty enjoyable. Yeah, this is the best film in the Rescuers cinematic universe. It's also just kind of okay. I think the first 30 minutes or so are very charming and fun. I love the idea of this rodent rescue aid society, and I love how in the first scene, Bernard is just straight up dressed like Mario. I know this movie came out before Mario even existed, but come on, Disney clearly looked into the future to see Mario's design, and then they just gave it to this mouse boy. There's some fun sleuthing and fun chasing, but I kinda lost interest when they got to the giant bayou. The villain is just kind of the Walmart-ass version of Cruella de Vil or Madame Mim, and some of the side characters are just boring. Hell, at this point, you start to notice that the titular rescuers are kinda boring too. But there's some fun sequences, like when the alligators are trying to catch the mice who are inside this organ. Plus, the climax is pretty fun as well. It's a perfectly decent little watch that I had a perfectly decent little time with. But whoever decided that this movie deserved a theatrical sequel instead of The Great Mouse Detective should get eaten by an alligator. Okay, maybe that's a bit too harsh. Actually, it wasn't harsh enough.
Fox and Hunt!
I really wasn't expecting much from The Fox and the Hound, but I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed it. It's just a very sweet little story of two friends torn apart by circumstances out of their control, and I was actually really invested in whether or not their friendship would be okay in the future. Though, perhaps not as much as I could have been, because the whole portion that showcases their friendship as kids is really rushed. It's like, they meet each other, and then immediately after that, a song starts playing in the background that's all like, "Oh yeah, they're the best of friends." Like, what? They just met. What are you talking about? Ultimately, I was still invested in their friendship and the unfortunate turn it took, and I was really sad to see them torn apart. I was also sad to see that they devoted time to giving the fox a female love interest, who only showed up in the last 20 minutes of the movie and only exists to be the female love interest. That was not a baller move. Another thing that I found kind of weird at first was the fact that nobody dies in this movie. Like, this one hunting dog gets hit by a train and he comes out of it with just a broken leg. It's kind of bizarre because he doesn't do anything in the narrative after this accident, so they totally could have just killed him off to raise some stakes. I was also sure that the villainous hunter would have died in some sort of accident while chasing the fox at the end. Or maybe the fox would die, or maybe his girlfriend would die. I don't know, there's a fucking bear attack and everyone survives it somehow. Rather than dying for his hubris in chasing the fox, the hunter survives and decides to let the fox get away when the hound tries to protect him. It felt weird at first, but ultimately, I kind of appreciate the fact that everything worked out and we could just have this nice story where people grow and everyone ends up on good terms at the end. Yeah, you could definitely argue that some of the decisions this movie makes were a bit toothless, but I nonetheless thought they all amounted to a pretty nice movie. Nothing amazing, but still pretty good and investing and underrated.
Please, sir, I want some more.
Alright, you guys want to know why Oliver is my least favorite musical of all time? It's because it's an entirely hollow show that constantly prioritizes plot over character. Every character in the story exists to move the plot along, but you never believe any of their relationships or aspirations are genuine. Oliver is not a character. He's a plot device for the characters around him to use, never actually doing anything to affect the story himself. The Artful Dodger meets Oliver, sings a catchy song about how they're friends now, and then ceases to be relevant for the remainder of the story. The main villain doesn't even show up till Act 2 and never develops any personal beef with Oliver, the quote-unquote main protagonist. The only sympathetic character in the whole show, Nancy, gets the most unfair and cruel fate, while other morally dubious characters like Fagin get away completely scot-free. I fucking loathe this musical with every fiber of my being. It's such a detestable storytelling failure on nearly every level. Oh, wait a minute, this was supposed to be a segment on Oliver and Company, the Disney adaptation of Oliver Twist. It's better than the musical. Still not very good, though. A lot of the same problems reared their ugly heads. Oliver never does anything in this movie that directly affects the plot. He's still just used by the people around him. The movie constantly insists that short, relatively uneventful scenes are the basis for deep character relationships, which is just absurdly flimsy. Like, Oliver winds up at this place where these dogs hang out, and then some evil dogs that belong to Mr. Sykes come. So he scratches one of them, and now the dogs are all like, "Wow, kid, you're really one of us." Yay, he did it. He belongs in the gang now, I guess. Whatever, it's nice that they're starting to warm up to him. Except no, somebody cranked that oven up to the max temperature because starting to warm up is the understatement of the century. The very next day, they pull a heist and he gets separated from them. And they're all like, "Well, we gotta save him, he's one of the gang."
One of the boys!
Yeah, call me crazy, but I don't think these guys are really the sentimental type. Especially not for a cat they met less than 24 hours ago. But whatever, they go save him from this rich girl's house, and he's like, "Hey, I wanna go back there." So they're all like, "Wow, how could you reject us like this? I thought we had something special." But like, no, you absolutely did not. I barely believe he even has something special with the girl. All they spent was one montage together while she sang a hilariously generic song. She reminds me of that girl from the Tom and Jerry movie. I'd rather watch the Tom and Jerry movie than this. With that said, there are some elements that are done better than the Oliver musical. Mr. Sykes is still boring and isn't nearly as cool as he is in Shark Tale, but at least he shows up earlier than halfway through the movie, and he has a pretty sick death scene. Occasionally, the dogs are funny. Most of the songs are pretty lame, but that one song, "Why Should I Worry?" that shit slaps for real.
For real?
I used to listen to that all the time growing up without actually having seen the full movie, which is the best way to experience it. But there's still changed elements that don't really amount to anything. Like, why is it set in New York City now? Because I don't really feel like they used New York City to its fullest potential. It just kind of feels like window dressing, and you could have told this story anywhere. Also, there's this Bette Midler dog who is just kind of annoying, and then the Cheech Martin Chihuahua starts hitting on her, and immediately you can tell that they're gonna get together in the end, despite all logic and reason being thrown out the window in order for it to happen. What does she see in him all of a sudden? I really don't get it. I don't know, it's not the worst, but its story and characters kind of blow, and in my opinion, that's partially because of the story it's adapting. I haven't seen every Oliver Twist adaptation out there, but there's gotta be a good one, right? They can't all be terrible, right?
He fucked a fish.
He did not fuck a fish.
He wanted to fuck a fish.
The Little Mermaid is my second favorite Disney movie where the best character in it is a talking crab. It's crazy how this is like the most influential film in the entire Disney catalog, outside of obviously Snow White. Like, it's a little bit quaint in comparison to how grand and mature and epic a lot of the other Disney Renaissance films are, but it's also important to remember that we wouldn't have those films without the runaway success of The Little Mermaid that could. It was such a bold choice at the time to essentially make an animated Broadway musical, and yet now that's the exact kind of film that most people associate the name Disney with. Yeah, previous Disney films had songs, obviously, but nothing quite on the same level as this. They never before relied on their songs so heavily in order to tell the story and support the structure of the film. And I'm just still in awe of how their first attempt at such a grand musical resulted in something so fully formed and magical right out of the gate. When you listen to Part of Your World, you can feel the culmination of decades of musical theater that Alan Menken and Howard Ashman were inspired by and pulled from, resulting in a moment more gorgeous and show-stopping than nearly everything that came before it in previous Disney films. And it doesn't stop there. Poor Unfortunate Souls is such an immensely satisfying villain song. Under the Sea is a bop that did not need to go so hard, considering how little it actually affects the story. Kiss the Girl is absolutely stellar, not only musically, but visually. That one shot where the camera splashes out of the water and slowly steadies itself, like, oh, so good! It's just such an impeccable, well-realized, well-paced, well-directed film. One that still manages to hold up and remains consistently entertaining throughout its entire runtime. In the Renaissance ranking video, I already offered my defenses of the perceived story and character issues a lot of people have with this film, so check that out if you want to hear more about them. But we got a lot more films to get to, so I won't reiterate them here. Bottom line is, this film's amazing, and I don't think I'll ever get tired of it. Anyway, can't wait to see realistic ugly fish singing Under the Sea next year. Thanks, Disney, you're the best!
My guy's pretty like a girl, and he got 5 stories to tell. I see both sides like Chanel, see on both sides like Chanel.
I'm sorry, I really can't stand The Rescuers Down Under. It got so much worse on rewatch for me. I've always wondered if maybe I was a bit harsh on it in the Disney Renaissance rankings simply because it wasn't a vibrant musical like all the other films on that list. But now that I've actually seen all the pre-Renaissance Disney films and come to respect a lot of them, it's pretty clear that no, I absolutely was not being too harsh to this movie. It's dull and boring. Nothing happens for the majority of it, and the titular mice have no role in the story until the very end. The villain is kind of fun, and there's a few sequences with cool animation, but the rest of this is just mediocre kiddie garbage. It's not even worth talking about any longer, since between the Renaissance ranking and this video, I've devoted way more attention to this movie than it deserves. Walt Disney Animation Studios, make a good sequel challenge. Impossible. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of inevitable. In my mind, nothing will ever unseat Beauty and the Beast as the absolute peak of the Disney brand. It's just everything amazing about Disney films wrapped up in this absolutely perfect package. I adore everything about it, and I have no real issues with it. In fact, I'd like to take that a step further and talk about the Stockholm Syndrome bullshit that everybody claims is in this movie. Oh, it's terrible that she falls in love with her captor. Did you guys miss the part where she left the castle in the middle? Nobody in this movie was taking this whole Belle being a prisoner thing seriously. Not the Beast, not the servants, not even her. She wasn't locked up, no one was guarding her. She describes staying at the castle as a promise she made, rather than an imprisonment sentence. And when the beast saves her life from the wolves and then collapses, she could have left him to die and continued escaping. But no, she willingly chose to go back in order to save his life because he saved hers, which is what causes them to grow to care for each other, which eventually results in him officially giving her his blessing to leave. What about this are you not getting? Go pick on something actually problematic like Pocahontas instead of trying to contort this movie's story to fit your poorly thought out BuzzFeed clickbait critiques. Anyway, yeah, I adore just about everything in this movie. The story is incredibly well paced and beautiful. The animation is so crisp and vibrant and gorgeous. The characters are lovable and endearing, including the greatest bisexual sentient candle ever included in a film. Plus, this movie has Gaston, who's all kinds of epic. I love how he starts out as a haha goofy joke villain you enjoy laughing at, until you realize as the movie goes on that, wait, someone this boneheaded and backwards thinking having influence over an entire town is actually a really scary and menacing concept. Just a perfect villain for this story thematically. And then there's the songs, which are genuinely perfect. Not a single bad track, as long as you're not watching the shitty Human Again version of the movie. Belle is the sort of incredible opening number that every musical should aspire towards, establishing the setting, the main character, and the villain all in one gorgeous 5-minute song. Gaston is an absolutely delightful comedic villain song. Be Our Guest is insanely energetic and fun. The mob song is really chilling and sad, especially when you consider the world Howard Ashman was living in when he wrote it. And then there's the title song, which I don't think any Disney film has topped in terms of sheer beauty. It's not my favorite Disney song, but I think it might be the most magical, breathtaking moment in any of their films. From the vocals, to that camera pan, to the angels looking down from all high. Like I said before, whenever I watch this scene, I sort of forget I'm watching a movie. I don't know, man. I just love Beauty and the Beast with all my heart, and that's never gonna change. It always felt special to me from a very young age. But even if I were to remove nostalgia from the equation entirely, it still holds up as the single greatest achievement of Walt Disney Animation Studios.
How
the fuck you know it was me?
Because it is you! You're just wearing different clothes!
I'm gonna be honest, Aladdin really loses a lot of its luster after you've seen Twisted 20 times. Like, by comparison, the only things the original movie has going for it are the music and animation, while Twisted is just straight up way funnier and more emotionally moving, and just generally has a lot more to say. I also completely subscribe to the idea that Twisted is 100% canon and the original Aladdin is a sleazy, dishonest retelling, which makes me hate Aladdin even more for slandering Jafar this badly in his false account of the story's events. Anyway, I'll stop comparing this movie to the clearly superior version and just look at it as is. It's pretty great, and I don't really have a whole lot else to add that I didn't already say 3 years ago. Well, actually, I do have something new, and this might be insanely sacrilegious or something, but oh well, here goes. I didn't really find the genie that funny this time around.
Squidward.
Now, Robin Williams' performance, that's top notch. So energized and enjoyable and an absolute blast to experience. But while the performance is fun, a lot of the jokes and pop culture references didn't really do it for me. I was laughing a lot less at him than I was with other comic relief characters like Timon or Kronk. In fact, within this movie, I think the funniest character is actually Iago. Not just Gilbert Gottfried's excellent performance, but the writing of this Machiavellian little fuck of a parrot just took me out. It was so funny. Aside from that, yeah, I mean, you know what's good about Aladdin. Likeable characters, a fun villain, an excellent climax, amazing songs. I have an entire analysis video on why A Whole New World is the best song in the entire Disney canon, so you can check that out if you want to. Whenever Abu makes little noises that vaguely sound like human words, that's the most adorable thing in the whole world. And Ahmed was the best character. I'm so glad he was in the movie so much. So yeah, really great movie, but not quite funny enough to justify its super goofy tone. Especially in comparison to the next chronological Mustard and Clements joint, which we'll get to later. Not an all-time favorite for me like it is for other people, but I still dig it.
Alex the Lion, what the hell are you doing in my car?
I don't even know where to start, man. The Lion King is just miraculously good. They nailed everything here. Gorgeous animation that I'd argue is noticeably better and more breathtaking than the rest of the already incredibly animated Disney Renaissance. A perfect tone that straddles the line between great comedy and intense drama insanely well. Some of the most lovable and iconic characters in the entire Disney pantheon. Some of the greatest songs that Disney has ever put out. The single greatest musical score of the entire studio. And maybe my favorite film score of all time. I don't think I've ever seen an animated movie as confident in what it is as this one. Right from the iconic first shot of the sun, all the way to the dramatic thud of the title drop, you already get the sense from this opening alone that this is one of the great defining pieces of art to come out of the medium of animation. If you were recommending Disney movies to someone who's inexplicably never seen any, I almost wouldn't recommend this as their first one because every subsequent Disney movie they watch afterwards is just gonna feel lame by comparison. And this was the film that the artists working on didn't have confidence in. They thought Pocahontas was gonna be the timeless, revered work of art between these two movies. What a sick joke! If this is where Disney animation was headed, county out! There's so many more things I could talk about, like how Scar is one of the great film villains, not only because he actually accomplishes his plan, but because he has a banger villain song and every line delivery and facial expression of his just oozes personality. Or I could talk about how Rafiki has echoes of Yoda in the way he brilliantly uses silliness to teach profound, life-altering lessons. Or how Timon has all the makings of a Tumblr sexy man, and I'm surprised that hasn't happened already. Like, he would seriously be a perfect fit for that. But you either know all that already, or in the case of that last thing, you're just now considering it and are furious with how right I am. So I should probably wrap this up. This movie is magnificent, and undeniably the magnum opus of Walt Disney Animation Studios. Easily their most significant and revered work in the entire century of their existence.
You got Steve in me.
Toy Story 1 is the weakest Toy Story, but it's also the funniest one. It's a riot. I am jealous of this movie's comedic timing. But honestly, aside from the humor and the general imagination of this toy world they've created, this movie just isn't really one of my favorites. Dare I say, it's one of the most overrated Pixar movies in my opinion.
Did he just say, aye? He did.
Like, it's a solid enough foundation for this studio, and it's a much better first movie than Ants, but it's got a few things holding it back for me from being actually great. It's probably not fair to say the animation, because it's insanely impressive for the time, what with this being the first fully CG movie ever and all, so we'll move past that. What I don't really like about this movie is Woody. I get that he's supposed to have this character arc where he goes from being really mean to more understanding, but honestly, he's just such a dick for so long that it makes a lot of this movie kinda unpleasant to rewatch. He had plenty of jerkish moments in the sequels, but in those movies you could see where he was coming from and kinda understand his perspective, cause those movies had much more nuanced conflicts than this one. In this one, he's just fueled by his jealousy and resentment, and while it's somewhat compelling to see him move past that, it's just not very fun. Speaking of not very fun, we spend so much time in Sid's dingy nightmare house, and I kinda hate it here. Not only is it an unpleasant location with a really unpleasant, annoying antagonist, but it kinda drives the pacing to a halt. Aside from Buzz's identity crisis, there's not much going on here until Woody and Buzz have their emotional reconciliation. My last big problem with Toy Story 1 is that it just feels like it's saying the least out of all the Toy Story movies. It's really good at setting up Woody and Buzz as characters and developing their friendship, but it doesn't really do much outside of that. The sequels all have way more interesting themes, compelling side characters, and frankly better stories than this movie. It's a good enough introduction to this world that becomes the basis for some of the best sequels ever made, and it has its fair share of incredible moments, like the entire climax. But overall, it's not my go-to Toy Story movie, unless I'm in the mood for some phenomenal meme moments.
Was the night where gust on the tired thunder through tired.
The Hunchback of Notre Dame remains as flawed as ever on rewatch. Tonally, it's a disaster, with so much of the slapstick and goofy sound effects played up to insanely excessive amounts, in what seems to be the filmmaker's way of compensating for how rich and adult other parts of the film are. It's a little underwhelming coming back to this film after watching studios like Ghibli make films that, despite the studio's cutesy reputation, explicitly cater to teens and adults, while leaving younger children in the dust entirely. It's evident that Disney never really had the courage to lean as far into the adult audience as they wanted to with this film, because how could they make something that wasn't marketable to young kids? Nah, we gotta add painfully unfunny jokes for the George Costanza gargoyle to say, and this horrible cringe tone-killing song with some of the worst lyrics ever that isn't even catchy. Fucking hell, this movie tries my patience so much. And yet, for all of its flaws and cringeworthy elements, it's incredibly evident watching it that no Disney movie has ever before or will ever again go as hard as this one. You really get the sense that the studio artistically peaked with some of the sequences in this film. From the stunning Bells of Notre Dame, which I believe to be the best opening to a Disney film, even outdoing Circle of Life, to Hellfire, which easily remains my pick for the greatest villain song in all of fiction, to the moment Quasimodo rescues Esmeralda and declares sanctuary. The glorious chanting, the sweeping camera angles, the deep colors, the incredible melding of 2D and 3D animation. I can't believe this is real. How did they make something so profound and mature and striking, with this much to say about the kind of evil that legitimately exists in the real world, all under the restrictive umbrella of corporate Disney? This is the kind of movie I can never see the studio making again, for obvious reasons. But I'm so glad it exists. The music is stellar, mostly. The animation is insane. The protagonists are incredibly sympathetic. Frollo stands as the most evil character in the entire Disney canon by a landslide, putting most other Disney villains to shame. It's a movie that just has to be seen to be believed. Not just in the sense of how did they get away with this, but also how is this so phenomenal? Is it perfect? Obviously not, and I do think the musical adaptation is a technically better and more consistent piece of art. But man, there's some aspects of this original movie that just can't be topped. I can stomach its flaws because even in spite of those, it still remains one of Disney's greatest artistic achievements. But what the fuck is going on with the capitalization on the Disney Plus subtitles? My girlfriend and I tried watching this movie there, and it's insane how bad a job the subtitle department did. There's so many words that shouldn't be capitalized but are, and so many names that should be capitalized but aren't. None of the other Disney movies we watched on Disney Plus had this problem, so seriously, what the fuck happened here? Oh well, good ass movie.
Was Hercules ever like, yo, I don't wanna fight
Hades! I will not apologize for how obscenely high I have ranked Hercules. I cannot think of any logical justifications for ranking it above many of the movies I ranked it above. All I know is, out of all 61 Disney movies, this is the one I have the most fun watching. And the one I'm least likely to get tired of, even if I were to watch it every single day. Yes, it has so many plot holes and things that don't add up if you think about them for longer than a minute. And I could rattle some of them off here to give the illusion that I'm giving this movie a fair critical shake, but I'm not gonna do that. This is my list, and I say Hercules is too consistently fun the whole way through for any plot holes to dampen my enjoyment of it. The animation style brought to us by Gerald Scarfe is so unique and expressive, and it really sticks out compared to other Disney movies. The voice cast is uniformly excellent across the board, one of the most solid in Disney history. Danny DeVito is utilized to his fullest potential, Susan Egan is so delightfully snarky, and they even got actual Satan to play Hades. Look, Disney, all I'm saying is, if you ever want to recast James Woods when you bring Hades back for Kingdom Hearts 7 billion over -0, final ending mix 69.420, all you have to do is cast Bob Odenkirk. Like, seriously, it's a match made in heaven. Or hell, I guess.
Paging Dr. Phil! My daddy's a drug dealer, and my mommy turned him in!
I'm like a god in human clothing! Lightning bolts shoot from my fingertips!
The music. Oh my god, the music. Imagine coming out of this movie not thinking the songs are top tier. Come on. Go the Distance, Zero to Hero, I Won't Say I'm in Love, the Danny DeVito song. Everything in this movie's a bop, and I have no idea how anyone could think otherwise. I feel like not enough people give this movie credit for its overall direction, and all the little details that are added in as both jokes and compliments to both the story and characters. Like when Meg gets pricked by a statue of Cupid's arrow when on a date with Hercules, or when Hades visits her by melting and splitting apart a statue of two lovers. And that Oedipus joke, woof, that slays me every time. Plus, I think the anachronistic jokes really enhance the screwball comedy at play here. It's like Musker and Clements took the genie's modern references and pop culture jokes and said, what if we applied that to the entire universe of the film? And weirdly enough, it works. The goofy tone complements the witty voice acting and the slightly off-kilter art design to make for a Disney film unlike any other. Like, yeah, it's got a traditional Disney story and songs and all that. It's still very Disney, but it nonetheless manages to stick out amongst its contemporaries, thanks in no small part to how much it commits to its delightful, zany tone, while executing said tone absolutely perfectly. This might be another one to throw on the pile of potential subjects of a full video later in the future, because I really could go on about how fucking amazing this film is. Yes, its dramatic elements do ultimately suffer a bit as a result of how much it plays up the comedy, but I still think it never really loses sight of its emotional core, which is the most important thing at the end of the day. Like, as dumb as I think Hercules' contribution to the final fight against the Titans is, I don't really care because I still find myself in awe of him finally proving himself a true hero, as well as still getting choked up when I hear, "That's Phil's boy," in the end. I'm sorry, I adore this film and I'm never gonna stop adoring it. It's just godlike.
Are there other bugs in your life?
No.
A Bug's Life is my favorite forgettable Pixar movie, of which there are many. I've said a lot of mean things about it in recent videos, but honestly, after rewatching it for the first time in ages, I've come to realize that perhaps I treated it too harshly. Don't get me wrong, the stuff that sucks about this movie really sucks. It's so overindulgent with the whole liar plotline, and it makes no sense whatsoever. This whole misunderstanding where Flick hired them without realizing they were circus bugs is really dumb too, and it's a shame so much of the movie's plot hinges on this dumb shit. Honestly though, aside from that, this movie is just really charming. Like, surprisingly so. The environments are really impressive considering how early on in Pixar's life this movie was. The characters are mostly endearing and funny. The action sequences and climax are surprisingly amazing. Hopper is such a great villain who almost seems a little too great for this movie, honestly. He probably elevates the score a bit because of what a good threat he poses. Randy Newman's score is a huge improvement over his already good Toy Story score, and yeah, overall this was just a really fun movie to revisit. It's not as thematically rich or compelling as later Pixar movies, which is probably why it's grown overshadowed by the rest of their impressive catalog. But it's kind of like the Pixar equivalent of Over the Hedge. Just some nice, funny, endearing, simple comfort food to snack on in between the studio's rich cinematic meals. Over the Hedge is still better though.
No, officer, I swear.
Now this is what I'm talking about. Toy Story 2 is a masterpiece and a huge improvement over the original in nearly every way. It's like a tiny bit less funny than the first movie, and let me emphasize that, a tiny bit. This movie is still an absolute comedic riot. It made me laugh again and again. It's so smart and tightly written and adventurous and fun, and as close to perfection as Toy Story has ever gotten. As I've said before, this is the Toy Story that feels the most like an indie film, specifically with the Woody stuff. It's very introspective and compelling, and there are some parts where I start to think he might actually be better off at the museum. It's genuinely fantastic stuff, and it sets the stage perfectly for the rest of the films in the franchise to expand on this one's themes. Because Toy Story 2 is such a thematically rich film. It's a story about abandonment, grief, legacy, found family versus blood family, and so much more. It deals with such heavy concepts while managing to remain entirely lighthearted and fun throughout. The Buzz storyline is a hysterical romp with some of the first movie's most iconic side characters. The Woody storyline is a powerful, deconstructive look at what it means to be a toy, and whether it's worth subjecting yourself to all the wear and tear and eventual heartbreak once your kid grows up. Ultimately, it's beautiful to see Woody decide that it's worth it to stick by Andy and give Jessie another chance to be loved by a kid again. They know it'll all end one day, but at least they'll have each other for infinity and beyond. Even when they're miles apart, living out different lives and doing different things, they'll always have each other. I'm not even sure what else there is to say. Toy Story 2 is just one of the best sequels ever made. It expands the Toy Story universe so thoroughly and tells us way more about Woody and Buzz. It continues the story in a bold new direction. It introduces incredible new themes that build off of the original movie's foundation perfectly, and it leaves a huge impact on the remainder of the franchise. It's probably the best animated sequel of all time. I don't know if it's my favorite though, don't make me choose. And it's absolutely insane to think about how magnificent this film turned out when you take its insanely troubled production history into account. Like, the fact that the film turned out this incredible given its insane time constraints is one of the biggest success stories in the history of film, honestly. It's a near perfect masterpiece and the pinnacle of the most iconic and acclaimed animated franchise ever.
Disappointment in the game of life.
And the single worst Disney movie of all time is... Say it. Dinosaur. I'm sorry, but this is one of those movies where I just legitimately cannot understand how anyone likes it outside of nostalgia. Every single time I see someone talking about how much they love this movie, they always say something like, I adored it growing up, or I've always loved this movie and always will. Like, would anyone think that way if they didn't grow up with this? I'm not saying it's devoid of quality elements. I mean, James Newton Howard's score is excellent, the opening 7-minute sequence with no dialogue is really strong, and some of the photorealistic backgrounds look very nice. But like, do you seriously consider Alador to be one of the best Disney protagonists? Do you consider Kron, whose name I had to Google, to be one of the best Disney villains? Do you think this story is one of the most compelling tales ever told by Walt Disney Animation Studios? They're just walking! It's just dinosaurs walking to a place for 80 minutes, all as the most cliche characters ever go through the most cliche dialogue and arcs ever. And I hate to say this because I know this animation was state of the art when it came out, but God, nowadays this is the single ugliest looking Disney film. All the character models and a lot of the environments just look like complete shit. It's so boring. There's nothing interesting to look at, there's no interesting characters, there's no interesting story. How do you make a film about dinosaurs, one of the objectively coolest things to ever exist, this dull and monotonous? I can't even really say that I hate this movie, because that implies that I have any passionate feelings about it at all. And I just don't. It means nothing to me. And I can at least say that I have feelings about any other Disney movie. So I guess that means I gotta rank them higher than something that makes me feel completely empty throughout the majority of its runtime. But you know what? I am nothing if not tolerant to other people's opinions. I don't care if you disagree with me about a piece of media. I once saw someone rank Majora's Mask as the worst Zelda game of all time, and my only response was, that's a bit silly. So you know what? If you want to go ahead and write your own video essay on why Dinosaur is an underrated masterpiece, and if you send it to me and I think it's well made enough, I'll go ahead and promote it on my channel's community tab. In fact, this applies to any movie I speak ill of in this video. Because the last thing I want is for people to parrot my opinions mindlessly without forming their own. The only thing that annoys me more than that is the love monkey. No one's opinion of a movie is gospel, especially not mine. It's good to get different perspectives on movies, and I would really love to hear some non-nostalgia related reasons why people think Dinosaur is good. Like, I'm actually genuinely curious, so please enlighten me. And until you do, I'm gonna go back to not thinking about this movie at all, because it is one of the biggest empty voids of a film I have ever seen. At least James Newton Howard brought his A game, but it wasn't enough to save this travesty.
That thing back where it came from, oh, so help me.
I've somehow gone this long on this channel without ever diving into Monsters, Inc., and why I absolutely adore it. This movie just has it all. It's arguably the funniest Pixar movie ever made, giving us tons of great physical comedy moments and hilarious running jokes. It has some of the most iconic characters Pixar has ever made, from the main cast to the side peeps. If you showed me this picture, I would immediately recognize him as the 2319 guy. This movie's characters and running gags are burned into my brain because they're so great. And the dynamic between the main characters is even better. It's cool to get a movie for once where we don't have to focus on an unlikely duo learning to become friends. We could just start things off with their great dynamic and focus on the plot and world building instead. Mike and Sully are one of the best Pixar duos ever, and I appreciate the fact that their friendship gets tested in a believable way. Every kid's movie seems to indulge themselves in that whole main character split up before coming back together in the climax shtick, but Monsters, Inc. is one of those movies where it feels earned. The scene where they split up really chokes me up to this day, and honestly, thinking back, this might have been the first time in my life when a movie ever made me feel sad. I must have been 3 or 4 at the time, but I can vaguely remember watching this scene and getting emotionally invested in something for the first time in my life. It's crazy to think about that. Anyway, speaking of usually overdone tropes that the movie earns, Waternoose is such a fantastic twist villain. Randall is intimidating and fun enough, but when you add on a second villain whose motivations line up and parallel real-world corrupt CEOs, that's some good shit. And the relationship between Sully and Boo is just the most wholesome thing in the whole universe. It's just perfectly paced. He grows to like her at the perfect time. He gives her a nickname at the perfect time. Their interactions are just so beautiful, and I wouldn't change a thing about them. Truth be told, I could go on for days about how great Monsters, Inc. is. Everything comes together, from the humor, to the world building, to the villains, to the score, to the climax, to that powerhouse of a final scene. If I had any complaints, it would probably be a bit of messiness with the story towards the middle, but otherwise, I can't get enough of this one. It should have beat Shrek for the first animated feature Oscar ever, but considering how many Oscars Pixar has now compared to DreamWorks, I think it's okay to let this one slide. Friends, I have talked a lot of shit about Ice Age today. Can you blame me? It's an absolutely asinine franchise that poisoned our water supply, burned our crops, and delivered a plague onto our houses. But with that said, honestly, the first one's kind of good. Like, yeah, the animation is ugly. It definitely has that studio's first CG movie syndrome. And there's your usual poop and pee jokes that suck as usual. But I think as a whole,
get it?
This is a movie with some pretty smart character arcs and an engaging enough story. Manny and Sid in this are just blatantly Shrek and Donkey, but without the nuance that made that relationship so compelling and special. But Sid in this is perfectly fine, and Manny is actually kind of interesting. In this one really powerful scene, they explain without words that he lost his family to hunters, and it becomes evident that he sees Ice Age Baby as someone he needs to protect in order to make up for his loss. I really like the wordless storytelling here. He never even mentions his family by name, but his pain and remorse is still made explicitly clear. It's really neat. The star of the show here, however, is surprisingly enough, Diego. I say surprisingly enough because he never has any compelling characterization in any of the 4 sequels that followed this movie. But here, he legitimately goes from a villain trying to lead Manny, Sid, and Ice Age Baby to their death, to someone who genuinely learns to care for them and ends up saving their lives. It's incredibly well paced and believable. Plus, when he reveals he was lying to them, they don't mope about it and kick him out of the herd. They end up believing that he wants to help since he has nothing to gain from admitting to them that he lied. It's a pretty refreshing subversion of the liar reveal trope, made all the more potent by the fact that he legitimately went from a villain to a hero over the course of the film. The other villainous saber-toothed tigers are just kinda whatever, as is the climax, which is a little awkwardly staged for some reason. But I really like the other set pieces in this movie. The sliding scene is fun, and the dodo bird encounter is really funny, which is not something I could say about almost every other scene in the other Ice Age movies. I don't know, man, this one's kinda neat. Not amazing, but honestly a pretty good first movie for a studio to make. Oh, also, I never got why everyone hated the Ice Age Baby a couple years back, but yeah, f that baby, am I right?
Now what?
Finding Nemo is a good movie. That's really about it. I feel like out of all the Pixar movies, this is the one where my opinion on it has changed the least over time. I thought it was good as a kid, it remained good as a teen, and it's still good as an adult. It's got really strong emotional beats and a lot of fantastic jokes, but like, overall it kind of feels like it's saying the least out of all the 2000s Pixar movies, Cars excluded. It's charming in its simplicity, and it does have great messages for both parents and kids. But the story feels very episodic, and not all of these episodes really go towards furthering the movie's themes. Some are just cute, fun filler, but not much else. Dory's an okay character here, but she doesn't speak to me as much as she does to others, and I really don't care for the tank gang that much, but yeah, overall it's good. It has really high stakes and an immense sense of scale and wonder, which is ultimately what puts it above Finding Dory ever so slightly. I'm happy to revisit it every now and again, and I totally understand why a ton of people rank this one as one of Pixar's all-time bests. It's just not quite up there for me. I cannot stress enough how much of a fucking miracle this movie is. I almost want to make a second video about it because I feel like I didn't cover nearly everything that's amazing about Shrek 2. I love every single scene in this movie. Every single aspect of it works. Not only is it consistently funny, not only is it a perfect extension of the first movie's world, not only is it tightly written to the point where there's barely any filler, not only does the entire soundtrack slap, not only is the story deeply emotionally driven and really heartwarming, not only is the entire cast amazing in their roles, not only does it have the best DreamWorks villain ever, not only is the climax unbelievably phenomenal beyond all reason, but this movie gave us Doris, voiced by Larry King, a true cinematic icon. I could go on and on about this movie, but I think you already know why it's a masterpiece. What a godsend of a feature film. I truly never expected Shrek 2 to be more important to my adulthood than my childhood, but I think that's just a testament to its staying power as an integral cornerstone of both pop culture and my generation. It's one of only 2 DreamWorks films that I would give that rare, elusive 10 out of 10 score to. Madagascar the First came out right after Shrek 2 and Shark Tale, and it's pretty much the exact midpoint between the former's greatness and the latter's shittiness. It's got a ton of really funny stuff and a ton of not great stuff. Honestly, in hindsight, it's kind of ridiculous that this gigantic franchise spawned from this movie. Like, I never could have imagined it if I didn't live through it, because this movie is really nothing special. I honestly don't have much to say about it that I didn't say in my original vid about the trilogy. It's a perfectly adequate, sometimes extremely funny movie that I'm pretty nostalgic for, but it's not really that great, so whatever. The only thing I have left to say is that comedy peaked when Melman said, "Guys, we're running out of time," with a clock stuck to his head. Look at that. Comedy gold.
Move it out, do the shit, take it back, and do the shit.
If I have to talk about Ice Age for any longer, I'm going to have a meltdown. This one is fine, but even as early as the second installment, you can tell this franchise was running out of steam. In the original, Manny and Diego had somewhat complex and well-developed character arcs, but in this one, their stories boil down to, will Diego get over his fear of water? And will Manny fuck this new lady mammoth he just met who thinks she's a possum? Yeah, she was raised by possums, so she genuinely believes that she is a possum for way longer than any rational mammoth should. I think a more natural direction for the plot to have gone would be if these 2 annoying possum brothers were actually twist villains who brainwashed Ellie into believing she was their possum sister in order to take advantage of her protecting them. I'm just joking. Or am I? I don't know, but all I know is this aspect of the plot is stupid. It doesn't take up the whole movie, thankfully, but of course, we also gotta have misunderstandings and arguing between them, and Manny accidentally implies that he doesn't want to fuck her for pleasure. He's just doing it for the good of the species to avoid extinction. Yeah, throughout the whole movie, everyone keeps talking about how mammoths are practically extinct and Manny and Ellie might be the last ones. But then out of nowhere, at the very end, a herd of mammoths show up, which means Manny and Ellie no longer have any moral obligation to fuck each other. But Manny still wants to be with her, which is weird. I didn't really feel like they had much chemistry over the course of the movie, and I feel like they'd be better off as friends, but this is a 2000s animated movie, so we gotta have romance. SMH, whatever. I just like how after Manny confesses his love to Ellie, all the other mammoths essentially clap for them by tooting their horns. That's a terrible cliche I never get tired of. At one point, Sid gets kidnapped by a tribe of mini sloths, and at the age of 8, I distinctly remember feeling marketed to by this scene. Like, this was definitely a prototype Minion situation. It has no bearing on the plot, and could be removed without anything changing, and was clearly just here to push these mini sloths as a potential mascot. But, I don't know, the scene went in an unexpected direction that I thought was kind of funny, so whatever. The vultures sing "Food, Glorious Food" from Oliver for some reason. I don't know, I didn't hate that surprisingly, even though I hate Oliver with a burning passion. Scrat is pretty good in this one actually. The slapstick is solid, and he impacts the plot in a few ways, but not in stupid, over-the-top bullshit ways like in the later movies. But yeah, overall, I'm not really feeling this one. It just kind of feels like a watered-down version of the first movie.
Get it?
Except the animation and the scale of the story and climax. The movie genuinely looks really good for 2006, and the apocalyptic threat is definitely felt, but the new characters are kind of lame and annoying. The old characters don't have nearly as much emotional weight to their storylines. The jokes are less good. The writing in general is less good. Oh well, at least it's not Ice Age 3 Dawn of the Dinosaurs, or Ice Age 4 Continental Drift, or Ice Age 5.
This movie blows.
Are you kidding me, DreamWorks? Are you out of your mind? Look, I consider just leaving this movie off the list entirely, pretending it doesn't exist, as I've done for the past year or so. But no, this movie doesn't get the luxury of getting off scot-free. It's awful. It is insultingly terrible given how excellent its predecessors are. It can't commit to a consistent fucking tone to save its life. Oh, you want me to feel sad that King Harold is dead? Well, I'm so glad you front-loaded his death scene with a pile of lame jokes and then played a random Bond song during his funeral. I'm so glad most of your jokes, some of which work on paper, suffer from god-awful comedic timing that completely butchers them. I'm so happy you gave us a dipshit villain we already got in the last movie, leading a bunch of bigger dipshits who change allegiances and motivations every time anyone gives a mediocre 2-minute inspirational speech. But I guess it's okay when 90% of the heroes are just window dressing who don't add anything to the story whatsoever. Every single new character this movie introduces is irritating in their own special way. Every single scene feels like a waste of time. This entire movie feels like a waste of time. It is worthless. There is so little value here, and I am so happy that now that this video's done, I have no reason to ever revisit it for the rest of my life. Oh, what's that? You have a single well-written scene? One good scene within this pile of shit? Well, congrats! I guess I'll have to give this movie a 2 out of 10 instead of a 1 out of 10. What a fucking tremendous accomplishment. So thank you, DreamWorks. Thank you for shitting on one of the best sequels ever made by following it up with this embarrassment. Thank you for turning an emotional series with actual intelligent writing for adults into a fucking toddler's paradise. Thank you for making people think that the Shrek series as a whole was always garbage and we were just remembering things wrong. No, we weren't. The problem was always this fucking travesty of a film.
I'm gonna kick your ass!
Kung Fu Panda is awesomeness incarnate. It is so much awesomeness crammed into a single movie. I honestly can't believe how well it works. It's a really great depiction of imposter syndrome and trying to live up to impossible standards imposed upon you. But at the same time, it's remarkable to watch Poe's perseverance and passion shine through, in spite of everyone telling him to quit. The philosophies offered by Master Oogway are really thought-provoking and interesting. The internal conflict Shifu grapples with over whether to trust his master's judgment or not is great. The pain Tai Lung had to endure after being told he was destined for greatness is really compelling. All the characters are instantly relatable and identifiable, which makes the drama in this film surprisingly strong. And that drama is channeled into some truly breathtaking, intense, well-choreographed, amazingly done fight sequences. From the prison escape to the bridge battle to Tai Lung and Shifu's climactic final duel, every new action sequence ups the intensity and dramatic stakes considerably, culminating in a more laid-back and humorous final battle that beautifully illustrates Poe's unorthodox fighting style. Tai Lung probably could have beaten Poe if they turned stage hazards and items off, but the fact that it's believable that a novice like Poe can defeat Tai Lung using the attributes and abilities that make him special, rather than by trying to be someone he's not, is a really powerful message. It's stunning how a movie this conceptually goofy can tell such a profound, exciting story that adheres to Chinese philosophies and culture so well. It's simply amazing. Yeah, I really do need to make videos on these movies, don't I?
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
Ice Age 3, Dawn of Who Gives a Shit. There are a lot of penis references in this one. Like, a lot. It's the only joke the writers want to tell for some reason, and it gets extremely tiring. Surprise, surprise. There's no better example of sheer agony than watching the beginning of this movie and realizing, holy shit, I'm currently not even halfway done with this franchise. I can't believe we as a species let Ice Age happen. This one in particular has really bad pacing. Like, it takes 30 minutes to get down to the dinosaur world, because first Sid's gotta meander around with his dinosaur kids and act like a supreme dumbass. When the dinosaur mom comes to get her kids back, Sid refuses to hand them over. I, for one, love it when a main character is completely stupid and in the wrong. Like not even partially correct, just 100% wrong and absolutely deserving of getting kidnapped by this dinosaur. At one point, Diego sees the dinosaur carry off Sid, and his reaction is so hilariously nonchalant. Like, yeah, it's no big deal. He sees dinosaurs all the time, apparently. Oh yeah, Diego's sad in this movie because he wants to leave the herd because Manny and Ellie are having a baby, and he doesn't feel like he should be around anymore because he's a lone wolf tiger guy. But wow, he learns to appreciate the group and stay with them more. It's so tedious. I hate it. Oh my god, I don't give a shit. it. I forgot they were even having a baby throughout the middle chunk of this movie, honestly. It's such a non-factor in the plot, which is at least something Shrek the Third attempted to explore. Very, very badly, but at least there was an attempt. Okay, this movie's not nearly as bad as Shrek the Third, though. I like the Simon Pegg weasel they introduced in this movie. His writing isn't that great, but I think the voice acting really sells it, and it makes me kind of enjoy this character. The climax is kind of cool and well executed, at least the first one. Yeah, this movie has 2 climaxes for some reason, and I don't know why. They could have just combined the 2, but whatever. Scrat fights Lady Scrat, and I don't know, it's kind of funny to see him eventually fall in love with her, only to have an affair with his precious nut. Yeah, I think that's all I liked. This movie is boring, it makes dinosaurs boring somehow, and they should have just ended Ice Age here. But of course they didn't, because we were all put on this earth to suffer. Like I said earlier, Toy Story 3 is kind of the perfect series finale for Pixar. I'm glad the studio kept going, if only because of Coco, Inside Out, and Toy Story 4. But regardless, this would have been an excellent place to stop. Andy represents all of us growing up and driving away from the studio and the franchise that gave us so many fun times and emotional moments. But the thing is, this isn't the Pixar series finale, and it isn't even the Toy Story series finale anymore either. As I've said before, most people tend to judge this film exclusively on the power of its conclusion. But if you strip the movie of its conclusive weight by making another Toy Story movie, what exactly does this movie have? Simple. Hilarious new characters, intense drama, a perfect continuation of Two's themes and narratives, and an expertly constructed, wildly creative Prison Break. I love Prison Break movies so much, y'all, so it's no wonder this movie just does it for me. But on top of that, there's very little actually wrong with this movie. The only big problem for me is how the toys don't believe Woody when he claims they were being put in the attic, but even then, I can understand how they would assume the worst after Andy called them junk. It's kinda justified, but still a little weird they don't trust Woody after all these years. Aside from that, this movie is simply phenomenal. I love how the toys all get a chance to shine as a group. I think the jokes are really strong. I dig the darker tones so much, and I think Lotso makes for one of the best villains in any animated movie. It's a film I just never get tired of, and I think it works just as well as a penultimate installment in the series as it does a series finale. Hell, in terms of Woody's arc, I think it actually works better as the penultimate installment, like I said earlier. It's amazing, you know it's amazing, it's Toy Story 3, baby. It doesn't get better than this. Except when it did before.
Fuck you! You fucking dick! Always.
God, now this is how you do a sequel. Kung Fu Panda 2 isn't quite as amazing as the first, in my opinion. It's a little bit slower paced, a little less funny, the action is a little weaker, and the villain is just a smidge less intimidating. But oh my god, for every one misstep, this movie gets 3 other things right. This movie is an emotional tour de force. It tells such a shockingly powerful story about grief and abandonment and emotional turmoil, and oh god, it's so well done. The scene where Po finds inner peace is one of the best sequences DreamWorks has ever made. Watching him learn to process his trauma so he can heal and acknowledge that it doesn't define who he is now is such a fucking phenomenal message. As I've said before, Shen is the most evil villain DreamWorks has ever made, and I love what a personal threat he poses to Po. Like, Tai Lung was Shifu's burden to bear, and Kai was Oogway's burden. But this is the only time in the trilogy where Po's connection to the main villain is the focus of the story, and it all builds to a sensational climax. The colors in this one also just pop, more so than the first film. It's visually striking, it tells a great story, it's funny, it's thrilling, it's emotional, it's everything you could possibly want in a sequel, and more. God, I should really talk about these movies sometime, shouldn't I?
You create. What? It seems today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV.
Ice Age 4. This is the first one of these movies that absolutely should not have been made. You could argue the second and third ones shouldn't have been made as well, but at least they come together with the first one to form a perfectly mediocre trilogy. There is no reason to continue past the end of the third one, and it shows.
What's up, my man?
In this wacky and completely necessary new adventure, Scrat becomes God himself and begins terraforming the entire planet. Also, Manny is Jesus, I think. I'm pretty sure that's what this line implies.
When exactly will I be allowed to hang out with boys?
When I'm dead. Plus 3 days.
just to make sure I'm dead.
His daughter is a teenager now, which is cool because that means they can do literally every single teenage cliche ever in one movie. They deadass have an exchange that's just 10 different cliche lines one after the other. How nice. There's an inexplicable Josh Gad mole that comes out of nowhere and is considered important by the end for some reason. He does not return for the 5th movie, so what does that tell you? There's a bunch of pirates, and I guess the Peter Dinklage monkey is like the first passable villain in the franchise. Like, he's mildly entertaining and has a surprisingly decent villain song and kind of a cool fight towards the end. I don't know, I was kind of dozing off at that point, so. I like when Scrag gets seduced by the nuts, because that was funny. I like how they introduce a female tiger for Diego to be in love with, because they ran out of things to do with him, so they just figured, oh, we gotta throw him in a passionless, chemistry-less, boring-ass hetero romance. Why not?
Do it, hetero.
Sid's grandma shows up, because I guess they just wanted Wanda Sykes in the movie, so they just invented a character for her to play. Drake and Nicki Minaj are in this movie. Yeah, seriously. I didn't bother looking up who they played, and I couldn't really tell, because who gives a shit? How come Nick Frost is in this one when Simon Pegg isn't? I feel like that's illegal. I also feel like Manny was way too much of a jovial dumbass in this one. He's so far away from his original personality at this point that it would be funny if I had any sort of investment in him as a character, but I don't anymore. This movie is genuinely intolerable and extremely boring at the same time. I'm not even sure what else I can possibly talk about at this point. It's just such a nothing installment in an increasingly nothing franchise made by a somewhat nothing studio. There aren't even nearly as many penis jokes in this one as there are in the 3rd one, so what's the point? Oh wait, I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry.
Oh, what the fuck?
Frozen, Frozen, Frozen. I've pretty much exhausted all the topics of discussion I wanted to say with this movie over the course of the many, many videos that have covered it in the past. But I do think this video, that delves into every Disney animated film ever made, is a great place to discuss the bizarre legacy this movie has. It's hard to really say if Frozen is overrated or overhated. I mean, it's kind of both, but also kind of neither. Is it worthy of being the worldwide cultural phenomenon that it is? Oh, absolutely not. It's baffling to me that this movie took off as much as it did when every other Disney musical from the same era were just so much better in nearly every way. But at the same time, while the movie and its characters remain popular with children to this day, I feel like most teens and adults are really dismissive of this movie. And like, I get why. It's annoying seeing it everywhere when it's not actually good enough to justify its omnipresence in our modern culture. But at the same time, that's not really good enough justification to call it a bad movie. Because it really isn't. There are some aspects of this movie that are exceptional and do live up to the hype in some ways. Like, Let It Go really is that good. Anna and Kristoff have great chemistry. Olaf is actually pretty funny in this one, and then never again, kinda like the Minions. And it's honestly a really well-directed movie, with good pacing and a lot of tension during the scenes that are supposed to have tension. All the problems lie with the script, and they are significant problems. I still think the tonal whiplash at the end of Fixer Upper is some of the worst in any Disney movie. The rock trolls themselves still suck. Hans still sucks. Do You Want to Build a Snowman? Still sucks. It's a movie where the good and bad elements are always at war with themselves. And yet, enough people latched onto those good elements to make this a worldwide hit. Because yeah, those elements weren't just good, they were phenomenal. But the film as a whole is nonetheless wildly uneven. And while I kinda like it, I'm absolutely not losing sleep over the amount of people expressing how much they don't like it. I can't even really enjoy the good stuff like Let It Go because of how overplayed it was. It's similar to how I currently feel about Hamilton. Sometimes too much popularity can be a detriment and make you sick of something regardless of its quality. And Frozen is probably Disney's biggest example of that. I think it's a perfectly fine movie with a lot of exceptional elements, but I could probably go another 10 years without ever watching it again. Also, just for funsies on this rewatch, I paused the movie before Let It Go started and put on the Kingdom Hearts 3 version instead. It was hilarious. I really want someone to just make a cut of the movie where it's the exact same, but the Kingdom Hearts 3 version of this song is inserted in. That's the ideal way to watch the movie.
You're right, that was my mistake.
I'm not talking about Big Hero 6 again. This is up there as one of the Disney movies I've talked about the most over the years, but unlike something like Frozen or Zootopia, where there's actually a lot to say about them, there actually is so little to say about Big Hero 6 that it's kind of comical how much I talked about it in the past. It's whatever, it's generic and lame. Baymax good, that was his mistake guy bad, everyone else boring. I don't hate this movie, but I also don't like it. It is the quintessential example of a perfectly average modern kids movie. Let's move on with the list and our lives now. Minions is a movie with the minions and they do the minion things, and I like to eat a banana and they like bananas, and then they have to be the minions in order to they gotta serve the lady who doesn't like she doesn't like the minions because they do the thing that she wanted them to do, but then she didn't want the one minion becomes king, and then he gives her the crown, but then she doesn't like them anymore, and then she tries to hang them, and that was my favorite part of the movie. You know, I went into this thinking this would be the absolute bottom of the barrel worst Illumination movie, but wow, they sure did prove me wrong. It gets worse than this. Yeah, truth be told, there were actually a couple things in this movie I surprisingly liked. The opening where they accidentally kill all their masters throughout history was pretty funny, actually. And this is also where the movie peaks, in the first 5 minutes. You can shut it off after this scene, you're not missing anything. Okay, but also, I thought this jovial family of villains that they hitch a ride with to VillainCon was pretty funny, and I kinda wish the movie was about them instead of boring-ass Scarlet overkill. There's also this cool stop-motion sequence in the middle that was kinda neat. I like when they're watching the dating game, and then Stewart's like, yeah, Stewart, cause Stewart's the cool minion, and he was my favorite, cause he's cool. I genuinely don't know what else I can say about this movie. It relentlessly tormented me and I want to die. It's blatantly obvious that you can't just make a movie starring tiny, blithering, incomprehensible tater tots. It doesn't work. There's no emotional investment or anything. It's just a collection of tired, annoying gags where shit just happens randomly with no rhyme or reason and barely any plot structure. Maybe it could mildly work if the slapstick was fun or creative, but it really isn't. It's such a dull, irritating affair with so many scenes that feel like a complete waste of time, and I don't even really have that much to say about it. Except for this. It's still better than Cars 2, because at least it knows it's a stupid piece of shit film for babies, and it's just a prequel spinoff that isn't entirely derailing an entire prestigious studio's reputation for all time. I have so little to say about Minions that I'm just gonna cede the rest of my time and use it to rant about Cars 2 some more. Holy fuck balls, how do you make a movie centered around an idiot protagonist where everyone around him is an even bigger idiot? Yeah, you know what? That's why Minions is better, because at least the Minions are the stupidest characters in the movie, as God intended. Scarlet and her husband aren't the brightest bulbs, but they have more brain cells than Finn McMissile, who'd probably mistake a fire hydrant for being a secret agent. And don't even get me started on Lightning. Yeah, Mater, you are the bomb. Fuck all the way off. It truly astounds me that if you added Minions to the Pixar catalog, it would still only be the second worst Pixar movie, thanks to the existence of this travesty. But you know what, if you like this movie because it's simple, dumb fun with funny spy cars, I can respect that. Also, if you like the silly, funny, haha Minions movie, I can respect that too. They're just movie opinions, don't take them too seriously. You can like any movie that I don't like, and it's completely valid to do so, you silly head. But yeah, in my humble opinion that you can totally disagree with, Minions and Cars 2 both deserve to rot in hell, but even though they're both down there, Minions has the high ground.
You underestimate my bomb.
What?
I like how with the non-Toy Story Pixar sequels, there's no real consensus regarding which one is best. Some people like Cars 3 or Incredibles 2 best, some are loyal to Monsters University, and you know there's at least one sick, depraved individual out there who genuinely thinks Cars 2 is the best Pixar sequel. Please, keep it to yourself. But for me, Finding Dory is by far the best out of this fairly mediocre group. Like, you still have to make a ton of concessions with it, just like with any Pixar sequel, but I think the movie's strengths far exceed its weaknesses. About those weaknesses, though, yes, it's real dumb that Dory gets these convenient memory flashbacks one after the other in order to move the plot along, and it makes the screenplay feel kinda repetitive at times. Marlin getting angry at Dory towards the beginning is kinda jarring and a bit of a regression for his character, even if it's just this one scene. Marlin and Nemo also also don't add much to the story, and the new characters, while fun, aren't nearly as memorable as the original movie's characters. Aside from all that though, this is just a legitimately fun romp through this aquarium. I really like Hank, and I think he has a great dynamic with Dory.
Yep.
Speaking of that, Dory is just more entertaining to me in this film than she was in the original. Every aspect of her backstory you could possibly ask for is explained in logical and clever ways. Like, she speaks whale because her childhood friend was a whale shark, and she can read because she grew up in this aquarium with all these words constantly surrounding her. That's neat. I also just love how encouraging this movie is for people with disabilities, and I think it's really clever how the movie introduces new characters who all have some sort of disability, but doesn't explicitly draw attention to any of them. Hank is missing an arm, Destiny has trouble seeing, Bailey lost his echolocation briefly, but none of these elements define who these characters are. Just like how Dory's disability doesn't define who she is or limit what she can accomplish. It's really powerful to see her parents worry over her and whether she'll be alright, only to lose her for so many years. That first person perspective shot where Dory thinks her parents are dead is really great and anxiety inducing, but the pinnacle of this movie is this incredible shot, where we see all the shells Dory's parents laid out in the hopes that she'd follow them home. It's such a tremendously powerful image, and I love how it isn't immediately explained. The audience is allowed to connect these dots for themselves and get hit in the feels. I don't know, man, this is just kind of everything I could ask for in a sequel to Finding Nemo. It's funny, it's emotional, it's just a really good time in spite of its flaws. It's one of the most overhated Pixar movies for sure. Like, come on guys, it's really fun. Also, the truck scene is complete and utter nonsense, but I kind of love it for that reason. Okay, moving on.
Look, your friend is going to be in quarantine. That's where they take the sick fish.
Bruh.
You had a twin brother all along? That's the big twist we were waiting for?
Despicable Me3. This movie is entirely disposable and forgettable and pointless, and I forgot everything that happened in it. So, I guess Gru has a twin brother, and the twin brother is just Gru, but annoying. It's nice that Steve Carell dared to ask, what if I took my Gru voice and tweaked it just enough so it becomes the most obnoxious thing in a movie that features the Minions? Oh by gosh, by golly, he pulled it off. The villain in this one is a child star from the 80s, and that's his entire character. He makes 80s references, and he likes referencing the show he was on as a child. At one point, he even says it's on like Donkey Kong, which is probably foreshadowing something. I don't know. Maybe I'll figure out what it is later. Hey, speaking of foreshadowing, did you know that Margot is wearing a Grinch shirt at one point in this movie? Because they were making the Grinch movie. And then in the first Despicable Me movie, she had a Lorax shirt on at one point. Because they were making the Lorax movie. That's pretty epic. Anyway, the villain has no presence throughout the entire middle chunk of this movie, and his supposed rivalry with Gru is so poorly established that it's impossible to care about him. He just doesn't do anything outside of the first scene of the movie and the climax. Instead, for most of the movie, we're just dicking around at Drew's house so the Goyles can go on wacky misadventures that are better suited for a Despicable Me TV show. And Gru and Drew can do bullshit shenanigans together until they need to steal a diamond from the 80s boy, and then Drew can show that he's ridiculously stupid and incompetent and a waste of a character. They set up this idea that Drew really wants his brother to teach him villainy, and it's like, okay, that could be interesting. Maybe Gru has an internal conflict about missing villainy in his old life, and he's torn between Drew nudging him back towards the dark side and Lucy keeping him towards the light. But no, that's too interesting. Gru can't long to be a bad guy again. We can't have the main character of a franchise entitled Despicable Me be interested in villainy anymore. So instead, Gru has no arc outside of reconciling with his brother, I guess, because they have a liar revealed fight, and then 3 minutes later they have to reconcile since 80s boy took the kids. So that's instantly resolved. This is such a good movie, guys. Wow, I have the time of my life watching these movies. Rather hilariously, the Minions add nothing to this film whatsoever. They have a subplot where they leave the no longer villainous Gru, which they probably should have done during the second movie based on the lore the Minions movie gives us, but also who gives a shit. So they go to prison and they realize they liked Gru and they go back to him and they contribute nothing in the climax, and so they were pointless to the overall story, the end. I'm so glad we had like 6 scenes focusing on them. That's nice. Also, they froze Dr. Nefario in carbonite because they didn't know what to do with him in this movie. That's incredible. I guess it was kind of sweet to see Lucy try and bond with the Goyles. The opening scene was pretty cool, and the climax wasn't bad, and I liked Trey Parker's performance as 80s boy. And that's about it. Overall, this wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it was very much not good, and I feel like it added nothing substantial to Despicable Me as a whole. Like, we got Gru with hair, who is also very annoying. Thanks for that. Don't watch this one, it's not good, but at least it wasn't as bad as some of the other Illumination movies. Woo!
The screenslaver interrupts this program for an important announcement.
Well, if it isn't my old, painfully average friend, Incredibles 2. Honestly, my original review of this movie is pretty much right on the money, aside from my unfortunate slander of the score. The score slaps, and I'm sorry I said otherwise. But for the most part, this movie pisses me off. It's genuinely one of the most disappointing animated films ever made. That might sound melodramatic, but when you consider Brad Bird's track record in the realm of animation, and you consider how we waited 14 years for a follow-up to the original movie, it's hard not to feel a little ripped off by the final product here. Because that's what Incredibles 2 is. A product. A product that lost an entire year of production because the higher-ups needed to push something out during summer 2018 after Toy Story 4 got pushed back. And it shows. This is such a first draft of a script that it's kinda comical. Almost nothing involving Bob and the kids is actually important to the overall story. It's just a collection of filler plot lines you would find in an Incredibles TV show. Most of it is decently charming and funny, but it feels like such a waste of time nonetheless. Dash's entire character is, I can't do my math homework and also I'm hyperactive and annoying and have nothing else going on. Violet is more entertaining here than in the original, but this plotline where her date gets his memory erased is so lame. Why can't they go on a date and she tries to act normal and hide her superpowers, but then she secretly uses them in some way to make the date go better? I don't know, do something like what the Tale of Zuko did. Do more interesting things with these characters. Bob was honestly really unlikable in this movie. Like, he actively resents his wife's success, and they never give him a moment where he apologizes to her or comes to terms with his disappointment at not doing hero work. They just drop this plotline entirely when we get to the final act, so they basically made him unlikable for no reason. Cool. Jack Jack is funny, especially when they pair him with Edna, but again, none of this ever becomes plot relevant. It's just more filler in a movie absolutely coated with it. The Elastigirl plotline has great action sequences, but they lead up to one of the lamest twist villains to ever come out of either Disney or Pixar. She's so predictable and her ideology isn't well fleshed out at all, leading to such an embarrassing and unmemorable antagonist. Her brother is also kinda lame too. I feel like they didn't go far enough with his eccentric personality. If he was more like Varric, that would have been neat and memorable, but ultimately he's just a forgettable red herring. The other superheroes suck. They have no personality and their designs blow. In fact, that's another thing about this movie. I honestly hate the new character designs. They just don't look good in this animation style. Usually, Brad Bird has great, expressive character designs for his animated movies, but the NPCs in this movie just look awful. Even old characters like Bob just look too wrinkled and super weird. Like, tone the detail back, guys. Good lord. Another aspect of the visual design they really needed to tone down was the 50s aesthetic. Like, it's cool, it looks amazing, but it clashes so hard with the aesthetic of the first film that it feels off. I mean, this movie is supposed to take place immediately after the original, but you could honestly mistake the original for taking place in the modern day. I know I did as a kid. This movie, by contrast, is so aggressively 50s that it doesn't even feel like it takes place in the same universe as the first film anymore. And also, why was Void set up as someone important only to not be important? I thought for sure they were building up to her getting freed by Violet on the boat, and then the two of them team up to free everyone else. That would have made for such a great, natural dynamic, and it would be a good payoff for establishing Void as a character. But no! Just give me my superhero lesbians already, Pixar. What are you waiting for? Look, overall, this is a fine enough time with good humor and great action, but it's got one of the messiest stories out of any Pixar film, and the characters just aren't the same. A ton of people got mad at me for not liking it that much when it first came out, but now, 2 years later, it's abundantly clear just how little of an impression this movie left on people. After 14 years of begging Pixar to release it, it finally came out, and now no one talks about it. And that's kinda sad.
Stop singing!
Damn, I can't believe it, guys, but they really did it. Illumination went ahead and made a C-tier DreamWorks film. I always knew they had it in them. Sing 2 is surprisingly kind of okay. Like, you can tell they put more effort in right from the start. The opening musical segment is better and more visually interesting than the entirety of Sing 1. The elephant even dabs at the end, so that's how you know it's really good. Anyway, most of the cliche character traits that were focused on with the main cast in the first movie don't really play as much of a role in this one. All of the character conflicts our main peeps have now are slightly more interesting to watch. Not amazing or anything, but they're not the most predictable things in the world either. And none of the characters in this are annoying, unlike basically every other Illumination movie where there's at least a couple little shits you can't stand. I don't know, the main cast of the Sing movies, while pretty cliche, are kinda likable and you want to see them succeed and become stars. All of them except for the Seth MacFarlane mouse, who thankfully isn't in this one at all, and they don't even address what happened to him after the last movie. He was last seen driving off with a bear hanging onto his car, so everyone assumes he's canonically dead. And that is just the funniest thing in the world to me. There's also some showbiz related plot lines that I kind of enjoyed. Like how this asshole producer guy forces Mr. Koala to put his daughter in the show even though she can't act. Or the plot about Lion Bono grieving his dead wife and refusing to perform or even listen to his songs for 15 years. I don't know, this shit ain't half bad. But that doesn't necessarily make it all that good. There's a bunch of stuff that gets glossed over real hard, like the daughter gets over not being the lead anymore super easily, and is even willing to do the show behind her father's back. Which, like, wait, when did they show her having problems with her father? That didn't happen, did it? And the porcupine sings a U2 song to Lion Bono to remind him how much he loves making music. That's a nice scene, but then the next time we see him, he's completely convinced to do the show. Wait a minute, shouldn't there have been like a conversation after the song about the ramifications of him coming back? It seemed like he was extremely adamant about not wanting to do it, but then him listening to someone singing one of his songs completely changed his mind? That doesn't make sense. So yeah, there's a bunch of shortcuts the script takes here and there. Plus, much like the first movie, the first act here is also loaded with completely unnecessary pop songs playing one after the other. And the middle kinda drags, and you really just want to see them get to the ending performance already. But overall, despite its problems, I kind of enjoyed myself. The characters are likable, the setting is cool, the villain is decent, the musical segments are really good. It genuinely didn't feel like I was watching an Illumination movie, like I said at the beginning. It gave me a rare spark of hope that the studio was becoming interested in making movies that can be watched and enjoyed by someone over the age of 5. And it was a more than welcome surprise. So yeah, more movies like Sing 2 please, Illumination. I can't believe a slightly above average film warrants a massive W for this studio, but that's where we're at.
Gru and his minions have seized the island of Korodai.
Minions, the rise of Gru, baby! Hashtag Minion Sweep! Hashtag best movie ever! Hashtag I wanna die! Oh my god, what an amazing experience watching this movie was. My friends and I from across the country gathered to watch this in a
movie theater.
And man, what a great experience that was. It was so fun to
pay for our tickets
and check this movie out on a
big screen.
And the movie was just so
good
and
funny
that we had a
wonderful
time watching it. Every single time they made a reference to the first Despicable Me, whether it be the cheese race scene, the Bank of Evil, Gru's future house, the future car, etc., I got out of my seat and clapped. I probably really disturbed the
theater
that I watched this in, but I don't care, man. This is pretty much the Avengers Endgame of the Despicable Me franchise, bringing back so many classic beloved characters like Dr. Nefario, the bank guy, the anti-villain league guy, everyone's favorites. And they even referenced Vector. Holy shit, my entire
theater
erupted when that happened. It was epic. This was simultaneously the most epic movie I've ever seen in my life, and bad. A bunch of people were telling me going into this that it was actually a pretty decent movie, and like, no, but it's actually not the worst thing ever, and it's an improvement over the first Minions movie. That's because there's a lot less Minions in this one, and a lot more of the Rise of Gru. And said Rise of Gru stuff honestly wasn't too bad. It's not really anything special, but I kind of enjoyed the bond Gru formed with Wild Knuckles. I think it was neat to see that he was mentored by this older supervillain, and that they had this strong connection, to the point where Gru inherited Knuckles' house. Yeah, I never thought I'd say this, but this is weirdly enough a pretty solid prequel to Despicable Me in terms of its story. It does have some of that Solo a Star Wars story bullshit where it explains the origins of a bunch of things you never really needed explained. And also, it makes no sense that Vector was born at this time unless you factor in my Vector Grimwalker theory, in which case it's the most brilliant cameo ever. Bravo, Vince. But aside from some unnecessary bullshit, I think it's actually kinda sorta neat to get this sufficiently satisfying prequel to a movie I really liked as a kid. I can't believe 2010s nostalgia is a thing now, but you know what? I'll fucking take it over 80s and 90s nostalgia. It's not nearly as nauseating. So yeah, the Gru stuff was not bad. Unfortunately, there's like 5 other subplots and they're pretty bad. The Vicious Six had the potential to be super funny, what with their creative concepts and designs, but man, they just have nothing to do in this movie until the ending fight. It's such a waste of these characters and the celebrities who voice them. Also, the minions have to rescue Gru, so they learn Kung Fu for some reason, and this doesn't go anywhere and doesn't really add to the plot, and it's a waste of time. And also, there's this other minion who rides with this biker guy, and it's also a waste of time. Basically, everything Minion related in this Minions movie is bad, as per usual. But the Gru stuff was mildly decent, and the climax wasn't half bad either, so yeah, you know what? I didn't hate this movie. It's not good, but it's the fucking Mona Lisa when compared to the first Minions. The funniest thing about it is that you can just watch it without having seen the first Minions at all, which is hysterical, and obviously what I would recommend. So if you want to watch it, definitely do what I did and check it out in...
I got bored of the joke. Candyland is not a real board game. Play other board games.
You won't regret it. Or maybe you will if you don't appreciate our Lord and Savior, Vector!
Who's this broad?
The Mario movie has been one of the greatest cinematic roller coasters from reveal to release in recent memory. When this thing was first announced as an Illumination project, we all collectively lost our shit. In a bad way. Well, there goes any chances of this being good. Pack it up, let's go home. And then came the casting announcement. I think we all remember exactly where we were on that day. You don't just forget what you were doing when Seth Rogen Donkey Kong comes into the world. Then the trailers came out and hey, wait a minute. This looks kinda good actually. Wait, maybe this is gonna be peak fiction. At least by Illumination standards, which is to say, it'll be okay. Then the reviews came out and oh no! I mean, I'm all for respecting other people's opinions. I really didn't care that critics didn't like a movie I hadn't even seen yet. But some of these reactions were more than a little unhinged. Shocking misfire for Illumination, the only bad movie they've ever made. As someone who is forced to endure HOP, that statement genuinely feels like a punch to the face. I'm not gonna say who this critic was, but her name rhymes with racist piece of shit who blatantly lies about movies and their productions to the point where James Gunn has called her out by name for being a bullshit spouting grifter. However, bizarre takes like this were the minority. There were a ton of other critics who just didn't gel with the movie, and after watching it, yeah, I can totally understand why. The movie throws a lot at you and barely explains any of it. Here's a mushroom. It makes you big. Don't worry about it. Here's a sentient race of monkeys. They exist. Don't worry about it. They make go-karts with anti-gravity capabilities. Sure, why not? Mario's a cat now for some reason. Okay. Big eel, ice flower, bomb dude with a Pringle stash, intense sex scene with Bowser and Luigi. The movie throws so damn much at you that it's hard not to be a little overwhelmed if you're not a Mario superfan. Like, is any of this universe cohesive if you've never played any of these games? Fortunately, however, this is where my encyclopedic knowledge of this silly-ass franchise comes in handy. I've replayed Mario Galaxy more times than the number of years you've been alive. I wrote this entire review on my phone in between my turns during a round of Mario Party 6. And that game has Koopa Kid. Yeah, that's right. I'm aware of the existence of Koopa Kid. I know my fucking shit when it comes to Super Plummin' Boy. So, whereas a critic with normal brain would ask, why is he a cat now? When was that established? Someone with my signature brand of brain rot can be like, ooh, I know, Super Mario 3D World 2013 for the Wii U. Nothing registered is weird to me. Everything here is straight out of the games. Plus, there's a ton of cool deep cut references to gawk at and go, wow, a deep cut reference. I really hate to say it, but this genuinely doesn't feel like a movie made for critics, or really anyone outside of kids and hardcore Mario fans. And I wouldn't blame critics for not enjoying the movie. I mean, I just don't think it gives them a ton to enjoy. The story and characters as presented in this movie don't exactly do a great job of selling outsiders on this universe. The plot is extremely bare bones and the characters barely have any development because the movie's always rushing to the next action scene. There's a scene with Mario and Donkey Kong that seems like it'll be a good, nice character character moment, but then it's over after like 30 seconds because we gotta rush to the next action set piece. This movie just desperately needed more character moments. Everyone's motivation is there on paper, but very few of them feel organically developed. With that said, did I need strong story and character moments in a Mario movie? Obviously not. The plot is just an excuse for action set pieces, like a kid's version of Mad Max Fury Road or something. The movie may be too fast-paced, but do you know what the alternative is? Meandering bullshit where nothing happens, which is what Illumination usually puts out. I was never bored during this movie, which is the best possible feeling you can get coming out of one of this terrible studio's films. And to the movie's credit, the action set pieces it races between are good. They're a ton of fun and well directed, and I had a good time watching them. The music is great, at least the instrumental score with all the Mario motifs. I don't need to tell you that all the licensed music editions were really dumb and unfitting. Like, Take On Me when we're introduced to the Donkey Kong world. Who is taking on who in this scenario? It's a city of monkeys. Just play monkey music. What are you doing? No sleep till Brooklyn. Cause they're in Brooklyn. Nah. See that one? That's a real. That's a thinker. That one is. Holding out for a hero. I don't even need to finish that. Stop using this song. It peaked in Shrek 2, and no one else is ever gonna live up to its use there. Also, I already mashed this song together with Mario 5 years ago. Illumination, I need my royalties, pronto. The performances range from fine to really good. Crisp Rat was serviceable. I guess that means we all owe him an apology, right? No, whoever stuffed Mushroom Kingdom, here we come, into the trailer deserves him an apology. We were just commenting on what we heard, and it sounded bad. Sidebar, can we stop getting mad at people for saying trailers look bad? We don't need to wait until a movie or show comes out to judge how an advertisement makes it look. Don't judge the whole movie yet, sure, but we can comment on bad shots or jokes or line deliveries when we see them in a trailer. But yeah, anywho, Christopher was fine. Anya was fine. Keegan-Michael Key was fine. I liked Seth Rogen as DK, but he wasn't really in it very much. Fred Armisen as Cranky was actually the weakest link. He didn't really sound old or crotchety at all and was just kinda lame. They should have gotten James Hong or something. We need Mr. Ping up in this bitch. Anyway, unsurprisingly, Charlie Day and Jack Black were the best ones. Not only did they have the best deliveries, but also the funniest jokes. Most of the jokes in this movie are generic. Not funny, but not actively unfunny or annoying. Which, again, by Illumination standards, you don't understand how much of a godsend that is. But there were some actual laughs that came out of Luigi and Bowser, who tragically only have like one scene together. The aforementioned graphic sex scene. Which is great, don't get me wrong, but the trailers definitely lead you to believe they're a more recurring duo than they actually are. Matter of fact, Luigi gets sidelined hard, which really sucks for one of the best characters in the whole movie, and the Mario universe in general. Jack Black Bowser gets plenty of time to shine in the film, especially in his musical moments, but he isn't really much of an active threat until the end. Don't get me wrong, Bowser is coming and all that, he's still an obvious threat. He just doesn't interact with the heroes at all until the last act. So you don't really get a lot of fun or threatening moments where the villain plays off of the hero. I don't even think Mario and Bowser meet until the very end, which is kinda weird. I liked the random, pointless, nihilistic Luma. I liked when the DK rap. I didn't like when they forgot to credit Grant Kirkhope in the credits. I liked when Peach just fought everyone towards the end, and then she fucking killed King Babam, no! That was like the most emotional I got in the whole movie. It's not a very emotion-driven film, you know? It's just kind of a nice film to vibe to and enjoy seeing all this Mario shit on screen in quick succession, with all of it flowing surprisingly well. It's not a great film or anything, the script is very basic and the characters aren't stellar. But like, I had a good time with it? I don't know, it might just be my dumb Nintendo fanboy brain rot talking, but it was just kind of fun from start to finish. And that's all some movies need to be, you know? It's not a Lego movie or a Puss in Boots, but we don't need to hold every kid's movie to that high of a standard. I know it sounds like I'm making excuses to justify enjoying this movie, but honestly, I think it's fine to enjoy movies that are fun and nothing else. Illumination hasn't made a movie with something to say since like The Lorax, and they haven't made a movie with something to say that's actually good since Despicable Me 1. And I haven't enjoyed most of their subsequent films because not only are they devoid of substance, but they're also boring, unfunny, annoying baby shit. The Mario movie also has nothing to say, but for the first time, I'm okay with that, because it's just a fun, engaging thrill ride from start to finish. And the background references don't hurt either. They feel like they came from a place of love rather than cynicism. This whole movie does. It really comes across like it was made by actual Mario fans, which these guys apparently are. And I think their passion really shines through. I don't know, man. I'm not gonna lie and say that I didn't have a super fun time watching this. Dare I say, it's a pretty good movie. I would watch it again. I can't imagine furiously hating it or obsessively loving it, but I really don't mind if anyone reacts to it in either of those ways. Just don't call it the only bad movie Illumination's ever made. Like, that's just willfully stupid. I'd call it their second best film after Despicable Me 1. That one at least has good emotional moments and Vector, but this one isn't far behind. 7 out of 10. F it, why not? It's on the lower end as far as 7 out of 10s go, for sure, and I can totally understand your score skewing lower if you don't give a shit about Mario. But yeah, from my perspective, it's pretty solid. I don't know. Pixar sequels are a pretty contentious topic, because I think the general public has kinda turned against them over the years. I've said it before, but the seismic cultural shift from, oh please Pixar, oh please make Finding Nemo 2 and The Incredibles 2, to, oh please Pixar, please let those stupid ass toys die, we do not need Toy Story 5, is kind of insane, honestly. Inside Out 2 is in a bit of a weird position though, because I don't think anyone really saw it as a nostalgia cash grab sequel. I mean, the original only came out 9 years ago, which, yeah, sounds like a lot, but compared to the double-digit waits we had for other Pixar sequels, 9 years is nothing. Plus, Inside Out as an idea feels like you could expand it with new installments pretty naturally. Did any of us really have faith that this would be a natural continuation of the first? Hell no. Have you seen Pixar sequels? I've enjoyed some of the Pixar sequels here and there, but not really enough to say that any of the non-Toy Story ones feel like a worthy and natural continuation of the story. So the pressure's on for Inside Out 2 to really justify itself. Is this a worthy sequel that stands toe-to-toe with the first film? I guess so. I really liked it. I had a very good time. Going in, I was worried that it was just gonna be the first film again. Like, oh no, we got taken out of headquarters. Again. We gotta get back there. Again. Except this time, fear, anger, and disgust are here. And yeah, the story is similar with a couple familiar locations, but they absolutely throw in enough new and creative concepts to make this one stand out and feel justified. Honestly, Inside Out 2 is less of a standalone sequel, and more so, what if the original film just kept going? Which in this instance is a good thing. That's exactly what this story needed to be. New emotions make their way into headquarters, and they're pretty fun additions for the most part. Except for Envy, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really see her purpose. She didn't really exhibit the trait of her emotion all that much, and it kinda just felt like Anxiety needed someone to play off of who would actually respond. So that's why she's here. Oh well, as long as Io Adebari gets a paycheck, I'm happy. Embarrassment and Ennui were pretty fun, but Anxiety is definitely the star of the show here. A really good and surprisingly likable antagonist who means well despite ultimately harming Riley in the long run. You can see where she's coming from with everything she does, and you want her to realize the error of her ways like Joy did in the first film. I also really like how this movie doesn't regress Joy as a character. She feels like she respects and values sadness now thanks to the end of the first film. It's not like other Pixar sequels where, oh, Marlon is too overprotective. Again. Bob is dismissive of his family. Again. Joy grew in the first film and stays grown, which is a nice surprise. I like seeing once again how everything happening in Riley's head translated to her real life actions, and vice versa, like when there's a stream of consciousness and whatever she thinks of shows up in the stream. That's fun. In general, I found myself much more invested in the Riley side of things in this movie, which was nice. Like, I don't go to the first Inside Out for Riley, I go for joy and sadness. I don't go to Toy Story for Andy, I go for Woody and Buzz and Chunky Kong and all my other friends. The kids don't matter in Pixar movies to me that much. But here, I was actually like, no, Riley, don't abandon your friends, don't break and enter and shit. I wanted to see her be okay in social situations and in hockey. And this helped the main conflict of Anxiety taking over feel more true to life. I also appreciate that we gave the other OG emotions from the first film more time to shine in this. Like fear and disgust had a lot more memorable bits here. Even if I'm still salty that they didn't want to pay Bill Hader enough to come back as Fear. Like Tony Hale did a great job and everything, but come on, he already played Forky. He doesn't get to be two Pixar characters, that's against the law and has never happened before. Ah well, no Bill Hader meant at least we also didn't get What's-Her-Name back. You know, the Velma lady. I know her name, I just don't feel like saying it because that's how bad Velma is. Shout out to Liza Lapira for doing a much better job with Disgust as a character. There's also a gaggle of fun new characters they meet in Riley's memory vault. And as enjoyable as they are, I kept waiting for 2 of them to come back, and yet they never did. I didn't need them on the journey the entire time, but I kept assuming they would return to help during the climax. And yet, only 1 of the 4 characters did. I don't know, man, that's just weird. It feels like they forgot. Another one of those 4 characters only appeared in the post-credit scene, which I stayed for because I'm a gentleman, but that scene felt especially tacked on and wasn't really all that funny given its build-up. Ah well, not a huge deal, I guess. In terms of larger issues, it does drag a little bit towards the middle where they're going through the same memory maze they went through in the original. Generally, the film wasn't quite as funny as the first one. The hot dad wasn't in it as much, and while the new characters were mostly pretty delightful, none of them hold a candle to Bing Bong, let's be real. The emotional moments also didn't quite pack the same punch for me as they did in the first, but I was surprised at how much a lot of them did work for me. And just like the first one, they can convey the meaning of the emotional scenes without words. Just one little shot of a character frozen at the control console was incredibly effective and got me a little misty-eyed. Obviously, I'd still give the first film the edge overall, but a lot of that comes from its freshness factor and how new and magical this concept felt at the time. Inside Out 2 does a couple things better, like utilizing fear, disgust, and even Riley herself better, while falling barely short of the original in some aspects, resulting in an overall experience that feels more or less the same. But, and this is the key point here, the reason the film works so well as a continuation is that it overall doesn't feel like a rehash. At its core, it's saying new things about the struggles and emotions you experience as you start becoming a teenager. The conflict does feel a little more complex. The world inside Riley's head does feel like it's expanding in a natural way. Aside from the fact that we never see these sequel emotions in any other character's head in the original, which, you know, who cares, I can live with that. Everything about this feels like it was always meant to be the next part of the story. As a result, this has got to be the most natural feeling and best Pixar sequel since, damn, Toy Story 3, I think. Not that it's that good, but we just haven't had a good one in a really long while. Yeah, if they can make more of these kind of sequels, then I'd be all for it. As I expressed in my last video, Pixar might be in some dire straits moving forward, with up-and-coming directors now being encouraged to tell less personal stories in order to make for more relatable films. Hopefully they don't take the wrong lesson from what looks to be this film's box office success. I think it's gonna resonate with a lot of people because it feels so personal with their struggles with anxiety. I mean, yeah, it is gonna make a lot of money because sequel, but I really appreciate that it's such a thoughtful and emotionally driven follow-up to the original. It feels like a strong second act to the overall story, and I'm gonna say something that I never would have even dreamed about saying 2 days ago. I wouldn't mind if they made an Inside Out 3. It's nice to get proof that every once in a while, Pixar's still got it. Just please take back what you said in that interview, Pete Doctor, and the future might be golden. 8 out of 10.